Shalom Aleichem Yom Chamishi by Shabbos. Today is Thursday, Stal Macheshvan, and we're learning another Mamer. Liosei Niflaos Gedolos Levadik Eliyel Mchazdei from Tafshin Lamed Daled. This is the 8th of 9 Maimorim that the Rebbe said in a month. This is the second Mamer of Shabbos Breishis. Shabbos Breishis was the day after Simchas Torah. The Rebbe said if I bring in Matzah Simchas Torah, B'yemei Shmini Atzeres, he said a Mamer Shabbos Mevorchim Marcheshvan, Shabbos afternoon of Breishis, which we learned yesterday. Breishis Baruch Elokim Ezeshmayim V'Soretz. We don't have the Mamer, we only have the Kudus. And honestly, I don't know if I understood correctly what the Rebbe was trying to say. That same day, at the end of the day, the Rebbe said another Fabring instead of Mamer, and this we have. It's 8 Amudim, it's a long Mamer. In the old Sefer of Hanochas, it's altogether missing, but it's here. It's a Mamer that the Rebbe said, Motzei Shabbos Breishis, which is considered a Hemshech to the Fabrengen of Simchas Torah, and it's a Simchas Torah Dika Mamer. Now I prepared it, and I wrote numbers, and the way I see it is the first class is going to be very long, and the second class is going to be far shorter. It's just the way the Mamer breaks. If it becomes impossibly long, I'm going to divide the first class into two and make it into a 3-class Mamer, but I don't want to do that. I want to do one very long class and then one much shorter class. What's going to be the difference between the long class and the short class? The long class is going to speak about the same theme that we had in the Mamer of Basukas Teishu Shivas Yamim called Ezech B'Yisrael Yeshu Basukis, which was the theme of Makachei Shmecha. The long class is going to explain Makachei Shmecha as it relates to Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Chodesh. And the shorter class is going to explain Makachei Shmecha as it relates to Shabbos, particularly, Beklal, and Shabbos Breishis in particular, which is even higher, according to this Mamer, than Makachei Shmecha, which is associated with Rosh Hashanah. That's how I'm envisaging breaking up the Mamer. If you'll notice, I put numbers, right? The first number, if you look at the very beginning of the Mamer, the first number is 9. On top of the page, the two introductions are 7 and 8. We're beginning on the very last pages of the Mamer. Page Nun Beis, we're going to have the number 1. At the end of the Mamer, which we're learning first, the Rebbe discusses the notion of Atareisa, that Simchas Torah, before HaKodsh, we say Psukim, just like we say Psukim before a Bris, just like we say Psukim before we blow Shofar, and after we blow Shofar, we also say Psukim before we dance with the Torah. And there's a total of 17 Psukim. Now, of course, the standard fare, the classic explanation is that the most important thing is the action. The action touches Atzmos and Hussein Sav Baruch Hu. But the Atzmos, which the mitzvah touches, is in a state of concealment. It's in a state of Helam. And in order for it to be revealed, you have to have Psukim. The Psukim create a light which allows the essence that the mitzvah brings about on a hidden level. It should be in a state of revelation. So sometimes the Psukim come first, the Gilui comes before the Yetzem. Sometimes the Psukim come after, the Gilui comes after the Yetzem, and sometimes it's both, before as well as after. Like Rosh Hashanah, there's Psukim before Tkiyas, and then of course there's Malchus Zechenis and Shefes and Shemini Esrei, which are after the Tkiyas. By Hakafes, the Psukim are before. So we're going to begin the Mamer at the very, very end, where the Rebbe explains this point, that before you dance with the Torah, you say Psukim. The saying of the recitation of the Psukim is a koyach the Eibishter gave us to read Psukei HaTorah, and in reading Psukei HaTorah we reveal a potent light of Elokus, which allows us to then go to the Hakafes and dance Hakafes, which is an extraordinarily high idea. Now the way the Mamer is going to end up going is that Liosei Niflaos Gedolos Levadei is going to end up being a Chesaron. And the Maila is going to be in the Kila Yelam Chastei. And that's how you have to understand this end of the Mamer here. That he speaks about the Maila of Hakafes and the Psukim of Hakafes. But in this particular Pasuk, in order to appreciate the Maila of this Pasuk, which is the last 3 words, Kila Yelam Chastei, you have to explain Liosei Niflaos Gedolos Levadei, which is explained in this Mamer at great length. And he's going to explain it to mean and represent incredibly lofty madreges. And after all the lofty madreges that Liosei and Niflaos Gedolos Levade is going to represent, he's going to argue that it's deficient. But the Kilei Elam Chaste is going to remain a Maila. If I understand it correctly, that's how it's going to play out. Kilei Elam Chaste. Because what's going to happen in this Mamer is Rebbe is going to revisit the idea of Makachi Shmecha that we had in the Mamer of Sukkos Teishvu. The Yamamshech Atzmus into shame. He's going to add something which we didn't have yet, which is that above Makachi Shmecha, there's the idea of Lasais as a Shabbos, that Shabbos is higher even than Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe is going to argue. And in Shabbos itself, Yidna Makachi Shmecha, they can add an even higher Madrege. And all of that is in the Kilei Elam Chaste. So the way it's going to play out, that Liosei Niflaos Gedolos Levade by itself is going to be a Chasaron. But when you add Liosei Niflaos Gedolos Levade Kilei Elam Chaste, that the Niflaos are not defined by how high they are, as represented by the word Niflaos and Gedolos and Levade, but how low they come, as represented by the Kilei Elam Chaste, as it's qualified by the Makachi Shmecha. This is going to be the real Maile of this pasuk. So we're learning the end of the Mamer first. So we're learning the Mamer as if we already know the question and the answer. So when the Rebbe brings here Liosei Niflaos Gedolos Levade Kilei Elam Chaste, he doesn't focus on the Chasaron in the Liosei Niflaos Gedolos Levade Chaste. He focuses on the Kilei Elam Chaste being the culmination of the Liosei Niflaos Gedolos Levade. Now the way the Mamer is going to end up going is that Liosei Niflaos Gedolos Levade is going to end up being a Chasaron. And the Maile is going to be in the Kilei Elam Chaste. And that's how you have to understand this end of the Mamer here. That he speaks about the Maila of Hakofis and the Psukim of Hakofis. But in this particular pasuk, in order to appreciate the Maila of this pasuk, which is the last three words, Kilei Elam Chaste, you have to explain Liosei Niflaos Gedolos Levade, which is explained in this Mamer at great length. And he's going to explain it to mean and represent incredibly lofty madreges. And after all the lofty madreges that Liosei and Niflaos Gedolos Levade is going to represent, he's going to argue that it's deficient. But the Kilei Elam Chaste is going to remain a Maila. If I understand it correctly, that's how it's going to play out. But I'm not going to waste any more of your time. I'm already speaking for 6.5 minutes. We're going to learn the last page in a little bit. We're starting at the bottom of Nun Beis, where you have the vertical line and the number 1. We're going to learn from there till the end of the Mamer, which is Pashad going to explain what the Psukim before Hakofis are in this particular pasuk. And then we're going to go back to the beginning of the Mamer, and we're going to learn at great length, Mamish, at great length. It's very, very bariches. The limitations on the pasuk, Liosei, Niflaos, Gedolos, Levade, and then we're going to say that above all those limitations is the Inyan of Makachi Shmecha, as you'll see soon. So let's begin. So we're beginning on the bottom of page Nun Beis. V'zeu klol singing Liosei, Niflaos, Gedolos, Levade, Kilei Elam Chaste. One of the 17 psukim that we say in the psukim of Torah, so before we go to the Hakofis, is this pasuk that the Eibush does wonders that are great, that are known only to him, as the Gemara explains it, because his kindness is li'olam. Now li'olam means everlasting. That's how it's translated in English. Your kindness is everlasting. I like to translate Kilei Elam Chaste, that your kindness reaches the world. This means that your kindness does not remain somewhere up there in the metaphysical realms, but it comes down to the physical world. That the Niflaos, Gedolos, Levade come into the world. And the Rebbe says, She'emin b'nei Yisrael kedim ha'akofes. We say this pasuk amongst the other 17 pasukim before Hakofes, ka'achon al-Hakofes appreciation Hakofes. And the Rebbe says, Hine klal l'sinyan Hakofes. The phenomenon of dancing Hakofes is taste for Simchas she'peil b'nei Yisrael. It's an additional joy that Jewish people are able to affect beha Torah, in the Torah. So of course there's so many different translations of the words Simchas Torah. And here the Rebbe is translating Simchas Torah, that we make the Torah happy. Not that we rejoice with the Torah, but that we give joy into the Torah. Torah is a wonderful gift from Atzmos and Hossein Sal Baruch Hu, and Yidna v'koyach at Simchas Torah to add joy to the Torah. And how do we add joy to the Torah? By becoming the feet of the Torah and dancing with the feet, like you have in the Simchas, that in the morning of Simchas Torah, the Malachim are wondering what taps are doing in Gan Eden, what broken shoes are doing in Gan Eden, and what shoelaces are doing in Gan Eden. It's from the dancing HaKofes on the night before. So we accomplish the Simcha by dancing physically with our feet, because the Sefer Torah doesn't have any feet, and we act as the feet of the Sefer Torah. But before they do that, we say the pasuk, the psukim. The reason you didn't have a koyach to do hakafas, and before they do hakafas, they say psukim, which give them a koyach to later do the hakafas, is mitzad sharshim shalamal me'atera, because the root of the Jewish people is above the Torah. And it brings the classic idea that Av Sha'omer Chazal, it says in Midrash, it says in Zayir, that Yisrael miskashroim be'raisa v'hizrah shehiyah miskashar ze'esam al-Kodesh Baruch Hu, that there's 3 knots, and that the lowest of the 3 knots is Yidden, and Yidden are connected to the Torah. And the higher of the 3 knots is Torah, and Torah is connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So our relationship with the Eibishter is through the Torah, and accordingly we're lower than the Torah. But of course, you know the famous Vart that it doesn't say today Kishin Miskashon, but that's plus Kishin. There are 3 knots, and the problem is if you're connecting Yidden to the Torah, and the Torah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's only 2 knots, and therefore it's brought in the Simchas and the Mamer, like there's a 3rd knot, and the 3rd knot is like a circle, which is Yisrael v'kushabecha kol achad, Yidden are connected to the Torah, to the Eibishter higher than the Torah. So the way it works is, first, a Jew needs Judaism, a Jew needs Torah to discover his own Jewishness. And after a Yid is connected to the Eibishter through the Torah, which makes him lower than the Torah and dependent on the Torah, and through the medium of the Torah, has a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then the shoe is on the other foot. The Yid reveals his connection to Hashem, which is even higher than the Torah, and allows him to connect the Torah to the Eibishter. And now the Rabbi Yosef brings it from the Zayir, I bring it from the Medish, from the Shefer Aboyer. There's another idea, which is Akasha Yisrael HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the bond between Yidden and the Eibishter, which is Lamayla Me'atera, which is above the Torah. And this higher connection of Yidden, which directly links them to Hashem above the Torah, is Yisrael Heim Peilim Hamshich Abatera. Yidden have to put us into the Torah. The Torah connects us to Hashem on the lower level. And once that connection is established and the root of Yiddish and Neshama is revealed, then the Yiddish and Neshama's higher level reverses the roles. And Yidden had the Torah HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mamer, like it says in Sfarim, it's time to Azeh and Sefer Aboyer, David HaMechaber Torah, Shalmayla HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Torah connects the Torah, David HaMelech connects Torah to the Eibishter. In other words, Hemshech b'Torah Matzmusi is Baruch. David adds to Torah something which is even higher than the Torah, because Yidden have a higher shadish, and it's this koyach that allows us to go to Akofas and be mesameach with the Torah. And it's this same koyach which allows us to say the psukim le'es and Niflaos gedelas levadik yelam chasdei, to reveal this higher koyach. Says the Rebbe v'yesh la'isif. Now this Sefer Haboyer, this Zayir, speaks particularly about David HaMelech. David HaMelech is called Hukam Ol, and he gave Hukam Ol Eilish Shal Torah, Eilish Shal Tshuva. David HaMelech is a very special man. So how do we know from the fact that David HaMelech is Machkasher or Machaber Torah Shel Ma'aleh HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you and I can do the same thing? So the Rebbe says, Yesh Leizer wish to add, She'inyan Zeh, that this idea that it says in Sefer Haboyer and Zeh, that David is higher and above the Torah and is therefore able to connect our Torah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is Shayakam, Kol Yisrael, do it every single one of us. Because Kivin Shedavid Hu Melech Yisrael, he's our king, and the king, it says in Rambam, is called Libon Shekol Yisrael, the heart of the nation. In other words, he's Klalus Kulam, he's the general neshama of all of us, he includes all of us. So whatever avodah he does, we all have a shaykhas to. Al derech, we have in Tanya Perek Membeis that Moshe Rabbeinu was a neshama Klalus in Lagav Moshe Milsa Zutra Sehi, and the Alter Rebbe explains because every Jew has a nitzat Moshe Rabbeinu. Similarly, David HaMelech is also Klalus Kulam, and every Yid therefore has the nitzat of David HaMelech, and David HaMelech's aveda will be mechaber Torah Shel Ma'aleh HaKadosh Baruch Hu with shaykhas to each one of us. Each one of us, and he gives you a proof of this, or an example of this, from the Geras HaKodesh Siman Chavtes, about halachas. Shematzinu b'negei l'kiyam mitzvahs, we find about the performance of mitzvahs. Sha'av shekol adam yisar tzarech l'kayim kol mitzvahs, every single Jew has to do all of the mitzvahs. V'ad shebashul zeh tzarech l'avim gegulam and abmechu, it says in Kabbalah, it says a kisvei arizal, sha'ar gegulam and sefer gegulam. And it's brought in Tanya, the Fiyadach Ba'arichas and Perek Lamed Zayin, that every single one of the 600,000 original neshamas has to learn all the Torah on all 4 levels of Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Seit. In addition, every single neshama has to practice all 613 mitzvahs on all 3 levels of Machshava, Dibur, and Ma'aseh. Every Yid has to fulfill all the mitzvahs of a Kohen. Every Yid has to fulfill all the mitzvahs of a Levi, and so on. And if you can't complete it in one gilgul, and it's virtually impossible to do that in one gilgul, you come and repeat it gilgul. But there's one exception. Still, there's the exception is the mitzvahs hatloyes b'melach. The Alter Rebbe says mitzvahs which have to do with the king. The king fulfills this obligation for all of us, because he includes all of us. And of course, the diuk is the melech is including all of us. The dafke says melech; it doesn't say kohen gadol, which is a tzarech hi and tzarech bi, what's an afkemenet. But there's something about a melech which makes him more connected to the individual Jew than how the kohen gadol is connected to every individual Jew. And that's what Alter Rebbe says: dafke by mitzvahs of a melech, that he's yaitza all the rest of us in our fulfillment of all tayag mitzvahs b'machshava dibur u'maaseh, and David was a melech. So for two reasons: first of all, because his liber shel kol Yisrael is the whole cloud. And second of all, because it doesn't tanya that he's to all Yidden, the koich is the David HaMelech has. The Mechaber Eraise Shalmaila Ba'akadosh Baruch Hu applies to every single one of us. In addition to the first 2 points, number one, that the Melech is Klalos Kol. Number two, that the Melech is to all Yidden in the mitzvah of Malchus. And number three, that the Gemara says every Jew is called a Ben Melech. For these three reasons, whatever avoida with Shaykhas David HaMelech, including this avoida of being mechaber Teira Shal Ma'ila Makadosh Baruch Hu, the neshama is higher than Teira, applies to every single Jew. And for this reason, and with this koyach, as a Jew is in a position when he's going to dance for the Teira to add joy to the Teira. But before he dances and adds joy to the Teira through his dancing, he says the psukim, including the pasuk le'es and Niflaos gedelas. Hashem does wonders that are great. Levada, they're known only to him. Kiliyei lamchaste. That the koyach that a Yid has as a melech, a koyach that a Yid has in his shelu, which is higher than Teira, gives him the power to say psukim of Teira Magala, because to affect an aliyah in the Teira by dancing with the Teira with his feet. By saying these psukim and this pasuk in particular. On the level of kol HaKedah V'Sheina Kadosh Baruch Hu Kedah V'Sheina Keneged, that the Yid says first, and the Eibush repeats after him. Now, of course, normally there's two levels. The lower level is kol HaKedah V'Sheina Kadosh Baruch Hu Kedah V'Sheina Keneged, when you learn, Hashem learns with you. The higher level is Tam L'Sheinim Resecha Keini Achar HaKedah, that when we're learning, Hashem is learning first, and we're repeating after him. Here, you want to say the mile of a Yid learning first, and the Eibush they're learning after him because of the Shadish of Yidden, which is even higher than the Teira itself. And when we learn Teira B'chlal, and we say these psukim, and this particular pasuk, Le'esei, Niflaos, Gedelis, Levadi, Kiliyei, Lemchaste, Befrat, Shadi Amidas, we're saying this pasuk, which is Be'efin, the Kol HaKedah V'Sheina, Kadosh Baruch Hu, Kedah V'Sheina Keneged, they pale, and we affect Hamshech, Hasan, Niflaos, Gedelis, Levadi, we bring down all the wonders that are great, that are known only to him. Because the Yid's koyach, to say Teira, to say Psukah Teira, make a change in the world, is real. So now we're speaking the mile of this pasuk. Liosei is a high madrega, and the Niflaos is an even higher madrega. Gedelos is even higher. Levadi is even higher, and the Yid can bring it down through his saying these psukim. Shabazeh says the Rebbe again. This madgeshes, it underscores ma'alosam shal Yisrael, the advantage of the Jewish people. Shebekeichem lifel, they're able to influence Hamshachas and Niflaos, the Levadi. They're bringing forward the great wonders that are Levadi. The strength that a Yid has to say this pasuk and bring down these inyanim, which is higher than the madrege of Pella and the Niflaos and Gedelis, and even than Levadi. We say who was Shmei, Levadi is even higher than Shmei, and that's the pshat leis Niflaos Gedelis Levadi v'Gemer, that a Yid reaches up to the madrege which is higher than Shmei. And the Rebbe concludes. Bezehu ha'achona l'ha'kofet. This is how you prepare for ha'kofet. Shabehem Paltiel b'nei Yisrael, when the Jewish people affect Simcha ba'Teira, to give joy to the Teira because of their shadish and atzmos. Now, so far he spoke about Le'es Niflaos Gedelos Levadi, and how Niflaos Gedelos Levadi is a pasuk in Teira which Yidden say, and Yidden are able to say it because of their Maila, that they're higher than Teira, which they used to be Mesabeach Hasateira and all those other things. But in the Mamer that we didn't learn yet, but the Rebbe already said, Le'es and Niflaos Gedelos Levadi by itself is not a Maila. The Kili Elam Chaste is a Mamer. Because Le'es and Niflaos Gedelos Levadi is going to speak very high Madreges of Elokus, till Madreges Lefnei Atzimtzum, which is incredibly high. But he's going to argue that all of this is Liosei, Kasiyah Gufnes Etzei Yisbarach. But it sets up Kili Elam Chaste, and that is Niflaos Gedela is the idea of bringing a lakus mekachi shmecha, being mamach atmas into the lowest worlds. And that's the last paragraph. He finishes now, right here at the end of the Mamer. The idea that Yidden could reveal the Niflaos and Gedelas and Levade happens in this world. Like the pasuk finishes, Kili Elam Chaste, that is brought down into the world. Leila means everlasting, but Leila means to the world. Like it says in Sifal Shadei Lamed, Kiam Dazun Datzilas. The key is 30, Chaf is 20, Yud is 10 is together, 30 goes from the 30, Svidus are the three elements of Biyah. In all 30 levels, the 10 spheres says the Yarin Bria, the 10 spheres says the Yarin Atzilus. In Yitzira, and the 10 spheres Yarin Asiyah, there's a Hamshacha of the Eibishter's kindness, which is the Madrega of kindness of Rav Chesed Atika Kadisha, Al Derech Mamer Azal Ben Egel Chovov Derech HaKadosh Baruch Hu Be'elam Eshen Zenim Bechaste, that the 26th generation of Anted lives in his kindness. That kindness has no limits. Shemishom Yom Shechacham from there Adla Matam Asar Fakam down into this world. Shana Teiv Umurechas Bonachaim Zerevicha Gepshut. Hashem give us a good and a blessed year with children and Parnasa and health, and Parnasa very abundantly, literally. And that's how the Mamer finishes. That we say this pasuk, which reveals very high madrigas nelakus. We say the words Kilil Chas, we reveal it in the world, and then we dance, and in doing so, we're bringing these very great brachas into the world. So I'll go back to the beginning, which is on page Mem Vav, and find out a deeper pshat in this pasuk, which puts a Lois and Niflaos Gedeles Levade. The Eibush does wonders that are great for himself. Kili Elam Chaste. That the kindness of the Eibishter is lo'olam. Again, it's usually translated as forever, but I like to translate lo'olam. That it has a shaykhis with the world, as the Rebbe translated at the end of the Mamer, which we just finished learning in our backwards learning. The previous Rebbe brings in his Mamer, Leitzin and Fleiss and Tafshin Dal, which was 30 years prior. The Rebbe Zogazun in this Tishrei said a number of Maimonim based on the Mamer of Tadash. Pirish Rashi ala pasuk. What does Rashi say on the pasuk based on the Fleiss of is as follows: Bereishin, in the beginning, Lein Nivra Malach. No Malach was created. In other words, before anything but Hashem alone existed, a sign that in Fleiss Halalu he did these wonders. And what are the wonders? First of all, Hashemayim va'aretz, heaven and earth. And second of all, Shemesh v'reich, the sun and the moon. And that's a very funny fit, because the heaven and earth is the universe. The sun and the moon are just two bodies that revolve around the earth. So what's the consistency? Umevayed Pirushi. So the previous Rebbe explains what Rashi is doing. The word Niflaos is an allusion to the very greatest creations that the Eibishter made, that are Kelim, Kama, Nivraim, Klalim, Pratim, which includes sub-creations. And even those sub-creations also exist in a number of categories. There's a klal from a bigger klal, and then a prat from a klal. That Beklal says Shamayim va'aretz, is heaven and earth, which includes Kol Tzva Hashemayim v'Chol Tzva Haaretz. That the pasuk is describing how Hashem is making the greatest creations of all, and the greatest creations of all are called Niflaos Gedelos, and they're represented by Shamayim va'aretz. But the previous Rebbe also adds, Hatam Sherashi Masagam Shemesh v'reich. Why mention the sun and the moon if you're speaking about the whole universe? After Gamheim Dechlalim B'Tzva Shamayim, although in the hosts of heaven you also have the sun and the moon. And he answers, because Klalos in Yanabriya, if you're talking about creation, it's Mugdam and Makam Azman, it includes both the criteria of time and the criteria of space. And Shamayim v'aretz hageder HaMakam. The heaven and earth represents the expanse of space, but it doesn't represent the passage of time. So Rashi therefore specifies the sun and the moon, which are Geder Azman. They have to do with time. Most measure of time has to do with the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon have to do with seasons and years and Yomim Tevim and so on. So what the Frierdiker Rebbe is doing is explaining Rashi. That when Rashi says that the Niflaos Gedelos goes on the heaven and the earth and the sun and the moon, he's trying to represent the most important creations in all the creations that are called Niflaos Gedelos. And it's not the sun and the moon, it's not the heaven and the earth, it's time and space. So Niflaos Gedelos is Zman and Mokum. Mokum is represented by Shamayim v'aretz, and Zman is represented by Shemesh v'reich. Now I just want to mention that on page Nun Beis of this Mamer, this is the second to the last page, the Rebbe talks about Shabbos, which is connected to Zman, and he says that Shabbos is not connected to the sun, it's not connected to the moon, it's connected to the Galgal HaYomi, to the rotation of the whole universe. I think there's a precision to this kvetch. I mean, how many times you see in a Mamer the idea that Shabbos has to do with Galgal HaYomi is not a common thing. And perhaps saying that Shemayim and Aretz is Mokum, and Shemesh Nereich is Zman, and then saying later in the Mamer that Shabbos is not connected to the Zman of Shemesh Nereich, but something else is indicating that the Zman of Shabbos is above the Niflaos Gedelis of Mokum and of Zman that have to do with the creation as a whole, but as they say in the real world, IDK, I don't know. V'zehu, and this is what Rashi is saying, is the Pshat and the Pasuk, Leis Niflaos Gedelis Avadei, Shehu Yizbarach Lavadei, the Eibishter alone. That means only the Eibishter, or the Eibishter before he created other intelligent beings, is Ois and Niflaos Halalu made these wondrous things, which is Shemayim V'Aretz, heaven and earth, which is space, and Shemayim V'Aretz, which is representative of time. That's the Pirashi's Pshat in the Pasuk. Abraham did wonderful things. He created the heaven and the earth, the sun and the moon. He created time and space. And of course, time and space are the foundational creations of everything that exists. They define the definition of a Metzias. But then the Frierdiker Rebbe challenges us. Shabbat says they're moving klal. Even if the Niflaos Gedelis goes on the most basic creations of all, which is time and space itself, it still wonder is. What is so distinct about the way the Eibishter creates time and space, as represented by Shemayim V'Aretz and Shemesh V'Reach, to the idea that Lavade, that the Eibishter is all by himself. Hare, emphasis, Klala Sabriya Klula, the creation as a whole. In other words, even more broad than the subdivision of time and space. On the other hand, Kol Prote, Proteus and Evraim V'Chulu, the most narrow of creations, down to the most tiny minutia. Hakel hu me'ite yizbarach levad. It all comes from him. It all comes from him as he's in a state of levad, as he's in a state of aloneness. So ma'u achidish dover. What is it that makes it distinct? That Niflaos Gedelis, Hashem made many things, but amongst the many things that he made, there's something called the Niflaos Gedelis. The Niflaos Gedelis goes on what we're calling space, Shemayim V'Aretz, and time, Shemesh V'Reach. What is it about these two creations that put them into a unique category that we have to say that the Niflaos Gedelis were made Lavade, Shu Yizbarach Esa, and Lavade, that the Eibush made them alone, the Eibush made everything alone. On the other hand, V'mchi the Shapelhu, and if the purpose of underscoring the wonder of Hashem creating time and space, and of course the philosophy would be before Hashem created reality, in other words matter, he created time and space. Time and space are the theoretical underpinnings of all creation. So they're really the foundational beings. And if you're going to say that the wonder is the Bria Shemayim V'Aretz V'Shemesh V'Yerech, that the creation of space as represented in Shemayim V'Aretz, and time as represented by Shemesh V'Yerech, is that they were created in a way from after nothing, ex nihilo. First there was no time and there was no space. And in the nature of no time and no space is that there's absolutely no anticipation for time and space. It's not like the Eibush has theoretical time and space, or ephemeral time and space, or possible time and space. There's zero phenomena of time and space. And the Eibishter, who's completely separate from the whole notion of time and space, brings forward time and space from nothing, from ayin, says that, and you want to teach us. The only the Eibishter can perform such a wonder of creating yesh me'ayin ve'ein dugma b'cheiken evroim kivu b'kama b'kemes b'dachas. Chassidus explains over and over again, right? Ilum is constant kol boy elum. Mankind, all of creation, nobody can create after nothing except for the Eibishter himself. So you're going to say that the Chiddush is that he made yesh me'ayin, and he would add one more thing, that since time and space are the foundational creations, everything would be built on top of them. So the yesh me'ayin of time and space is the precursor, is the most seminal event of yesh me'ayin for this yesh me'ayin events that are going to occur in that framework. Says the Rebbe, it's also not good. Because kol haneflois hagedelis halalu, all of the greatest of wonders, including the wonder of having created time and space, they're considered great to us. Because inyan bria yesh me'ayin, the phenomenon of creation, and particular creation in the kind of way, which is called yesh me'ayin, in the Lashon from Chassidus, hel v'hester abeirem aniv, to have created in a way that the creation has no way. Who created him, it's pliya gedela, it's only wondrous, it's leinu for us, I will let's say yizbarach. As far as he's concerned, that's also not a big deal. Gam inyan ebriya yesh me'ayin, even creating reality, including the most foundational building blocks of the reality, the space of the reality, and the time of the reality, in a way of yesh me'ayin, to him is klach shiv, has no significance whatsoever. And therefore, back to the question, what are we praising? That the Eibishter all by himself creates Niflaos gedelis. Either speak about everything or don't speak about anything. Big is not big and little is not little, and nothing is a big deal to him. So what is the pasuk saying? What is the pasuk denoting when it says only the Eibishter? As he is by himself did Niflaos gedelis shemasmo, who it seems to indicate. Hashem, as he is alone, Hem kviyachol Niflaos, they're considered wonders. V'leistam Niflaos, and not ordinary Niflaos, but Niflaos does great wonders. So the Rebbe is saying for the Eibishter to create, b'chalal, even for the Eibishter to create the most basic of all creations, which is space and time themselves, which is the foundation of all creations that exist within the parameters of time and space. It's all to him. It's all nothing to him. So what are we praising him for? For creating the world? What's the big deal? What's the big deal? And then the Frierdiker Rebbe, in order to answer this question, brings another pshat which is supposed to help it along. Who the teres to the kasha of why it's a big deal that Hashem created time and space. The Rebbe Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe's father. Pirish b'shem Abba Shem Tov Shmasei brings the same pasuk leis Niflaos gedelis levadei and brings a different interpretation. Shakadosh Baruch Hu that the Eibishter nikol mashu eiseh, all that he does is Niflaos gedelis levadei. The wonders that he does are great, and the greatness is levadei. The gedel haflaos v'shalom Niflaos, the great wonder of these various different wonders is rak levadei yedei azes. Only he knows it. And that's the pshat in this pasuk. Leis Niflaos gedelis. The Eibishter does such great wonders that lavadi, only he is aware of the greatness of these Niflaos. And by the way, Memuz the Tzel and the Maise, Harav Yankiv Yehuda Hecht, all of Hashem Zachein Levracha, tells the story in one of the big fabrengens that took place in 770. Bechar by Hecht, when he spoke in 770, he would come prepared. He wouldn't just come azoi. So he told the Meir Nika Maise that in America there is an exemption from military service for divinity students. That means if you're going to study to be a clergy, you're exempt from the military. And my understanding is that you're exempt from the military because there's a presumption of batlanis. If that's what you're going to do for a living, become a rabbi or lahavdil, a galach, mistamet takes the nishta. So during the Second World War, there was talk about removing that exemption and giving divinity students the obligation to serve. Selective service, the draft. Rabbi Hecht said they made him into the guinea pig. He was going to be the model. They were going to prove he's a divinity student. Gibakuk, hoich, stark, gesund, healthy, strong specimen. He could certainly be a great soldier. So he says that he went into, as Rabbi Hecht says, Yenim Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, together with his father. And his father Rebbe told, the Frierdiker Rebbe said to his father, I don't know when this was, 41, 42, it was during the war. Rabbi Harav Yankiv Yehuda Hecht got married in Tafshin Zayin in 1947. So it was a few years before. I don't know what it was, 43, 44, I don't know when it was. Remember, the war started in America in December of 41. And the Rebbe said, the Frierdiker Rebbe told him as follows. So the Eibishter helfen, as was b'derech hatef. Hashem should help that you should be exempt from serving within the parameters of nature. Und ob nicht, b'derech nes. And if not, you should have a miracle. And off they went. And he describes going someplace in Brooklyn, and he had to take off his clothes, and he was examined by one doctor, and a second doctor, and a third doctor, and he passes every test with flying colors. He was healthy, and he was tall, and he fit to the uniform, and he was alamilas. The last doctor was a psychiatrist, an old man, and he starts asking Rabbi Hecht tons of questions about what he does and what he does with his spare time. And he tells him that he sits and learns Torah, and in his spare time he makes Mesiba Shabbos, and he brings kids to Fabreng, and he says, you don't go to the movies? No, it's Avodah Zarah. You don't have a girlfriend, Rahman al-Tzan. Anyway, this guy asks him a ton of questions. And Rabbi Hecht answers like he was the Chassidische Bacher that he was. He's busy just with Yiddishkeit. And when he was finished, this psychiatrist said to Rabbi Hecht, you know what I think? I think you're nuts. I think you're crazy. And he wrote down 4F. 4F means if he's the last man standing in America, they shouldn't send him to serve. Complete gepatet. was Mabishad Nes Enkomayu. That this guy decided that his Meshuggah is Tefashrim, and it saved many other Yeshiva Bacharim the need to serve. A Kitzer, they came back to 770, and they went to the Rebbe again. You have to assume this was in early enough years when the Rebbe had time. And they went into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was very happy, and the Rebbe told them, the Frierdiker Rebbe said to them, in other words, you know that a miracle happened, but you don't know how big a miracle. You don't know how big a miracle just happened. The Frierdiker Rebbe said to them. And then the Rebbe started to sing with a nig. Le'eis and Niflaos. The Eibishter macht Wunder. Hashem makes wonders. Gedele is the grace. Niflaos. How great the miracles are. Levade veis nor the Rebbeinu Shalom Alein. Only the Eibishter himself knows. This Mamer, which was said in Tafshin Dalet, which is 1943, is speaking to the exact same point. Le'eis and Niflaos. The Eibishter does wonders. Gedele is just how big a wonder it is. Levade veis nor the Eibishter. Only the Eibishter. That's what the Rebbe Rashab says is pshat in this pasuk in the name of the Baal Shem Tov. But here you have something we don't have in that story. That what's the Eis Nefesh Del Savade? So according to Rashi, the Eis Nefesh Del Savade is that he makes time and space, Mokum and Zman, and the Rebbe had a bunch of kashas on it. But according to the Rebbe Rashab, the Baal Shem Tov, Echad Migdulasim Sheneflois, who what is the greatness of the wonders? Kili Elam Chaste. That the kindness of the Eibishter is brought into the world. And he uses a Kabbalah, the East of Beitz Chai B'Tez and Kabbalah. Top of page, Mem Zayin Alam at Kelm, the Zundat Tzilis. The Netzach Hayd Yisayid of Atzilus is 3 Sfiras. Each one has within them 10. So there's this 10 Kalim of Netzach, the 10 Kalim of Hayd, and the 10 Kalim of Yisayid. They become Naram Labiyah, they become the 10 Sfiras of Bria, the 10 spheres of Yetzirah, and then spheres of Asir, which is the remez of Ki. Ki is 30. Chaf is 20, Yud is 10, is together is 30. That the 30 Kalim of each of the 3 worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asir, they get from the Nihi of Atzilus. That Alam Akim, the Zunda Atzilus. La'olam, they come into the lower worlds, and Nasmer and Labiyah, they become the Nesham of the lower worlds. Such Ki. Right? The wonder is that the same Elokus you have in Atzilus comes into the lower world. What we had in the earlier Mamer, that it says in Tanya, Nago and Perik Nun Beis, Malchus and Malchus Kol Elamim, that is the same Esespheres. The same Esespheres that you have in Atzilus, they also come into the lower 3 worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. But then there's a Chap. Since Ki, that the same spheres you have in Atzilus come into Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, so then you have Li'elam, Chaste. That into the lower worlds where the Kalim of Atzilus have come, Bahem Ba'yadim, through these Kalim, which came from Atzilus and descended into the lower 3 worlds, is Hamshach as Chasted, the Eibishter's kindness is brought down into this world. And the Rebbe says that Chaste with a Vov is Rav Chesed, the Atika Gedisha, it's Rav Chesed of Atik, right? You have in the Yom Midas Racham, Hashem, which are not from the Yom Midas, Kel, Racham, B'chanan, Erech, Apayin, Rav Chesed is the 6th, and the Emes is the 2nd. So the Rav Chesed, the Pashtos, the Yom Midas Racham are in Arich. But here he says that Rav Chesed is Atik, which is Chazdi, is Baruch Amiti, the true union of Chesed of the Eibishter, and that's the wonder. The wonder is not that Hashem made the heaven and the earth. The wonder is not that Hashem made the sun and the moon. The wonder is not that Hashem made time and space. The wonder is that Kilielam Chasted, into this lowest world, there's a Gili of Elokus, which comes from Atika Kedish. V'zeh, when this is Le'eis and Niflaos, the Kol Asi Yosef Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what Hashem does is Niflaos, is wondrous. Ugdulasam, and this includes the idea that into the lowest worlds he brings the highest chesed. But Ugdulasam Shal Niflaos, just how great a Pella it is, Yadu Alei Yizbarach, all that the Eibishter knows, which is Gedeles Levad. So what's the difference between the Rebbe Rashab's Pshat and the Rashi's Pshat? Rashi's Pshat and the Niflaos Hashem made the world. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says, really, that's the Pella, Hashem made the world. Even Yesh Me'ayin is not. The Rebbe Rashab, the name of Hashem Tov, is that he brings into this world Gili Elokus, and that's the Pella. So the second Pshat that the Frierdiker Rebbe brings is supposed to answer the Kasha, the first Pshat. But it doesn't really answer the Kasha, the first Pshat, it just replaces it. The first Pshat, according to the Frierdiker Rebbe, remains problematic. The first Pshat is that the wonders of the Eibush is that he created time and space, and the Frierdiker Rebbe says, I'm not impressed. You're talking about the Eibush. The second pshat, that Niflaos Gedelos Levade come into these worlds, and we don't even know how big a pella Eibishter is doing, that's the shtenashtikel pella, that into this low, dark world, Niflaos Gedelos come, and only the Eibishter knows the gracekeit from the Niflaos. That's a justification. But how does that help Rashi? So the Rebbe Rasha brings the Bashant of a second pshat, which explains the pasuk, but the Rashi's pshat on the pasuk remains problematic. So now comes our Rebbe. I want to say, says our Rebbe, that there's a way to enhance Rashi's pshat, the first pshat which the Frierdiker Rebbe questions, and by enhancing the pshat of Rashi, the second pshat that the Rebbe Rasha brings actually becomes an answer to the kashas that we asked on Rashi. What's the chab? That Gam Lapidush Aleph, even the first pshat, where Rashi is saying that the great wonders the Eibishter made is that it created time and space, and we're wondering what's the big deal that the Eibishter by himself created time and space, says Rabbi, you're misunderstanding the pshat of Rashi. When it says only the Eibishter, all by himself, created time and space, and we're supposed to be impressed that only the Eibishter could create Zman and Makam Me'ayin Liyesh, and the Rebbe says it's no big deal. This is considered great wonders, and the previous Rebbe said that's not a good answer. So the Rebbe says, I'll tell you what Rashi is saying. When Rashi says that Niflaos Gedelos Levade, the Eibishter all by himself, creates such wonders as Makom Zman, the pshat in this pasuk is not that he made wonderful creations. The pshat in this pasuk is Akdomas Tevis Liosei. What Rashi is really saying is that the Niflaos Gedelos Levade are in the Madrega of Liosei. Liosei Niflaos Gedelos Levade translates the Rebbe. Shagam Hoen Yon Shebebchinis Niflaos Gedelos, even those ideas that are wonders on the very highest Madregas. How high are they? Afilu K'mei Shem Levade, the Eibishter by himself, which the Rebbe's Logazunzan is going to explain at length on page Mem Zayin and on page Mem Chesen and on page Mem Tes. Says the Heilige Rebbe, they're nothing more than Asiyah Liosei Bavad. Go back and reread Rashi, says the Rebbe. Niflaos Gedelos Levade means that the Eibishter made heaven and earth, sun and moon, Hashem created time and space. And we think that the Teda, that the Tilim, the David HaMelech, is being mafli the Eibishter to have created heaven and earth. No. David HaMelech is being mafli the Eibishter, that Niflaos Gedelos Levade is only the Madrega of Asiyah. Faket, the Rebbe says. The Frierdiker Rebbe brings Rashi's pshat, and he asks a bunch of kashas, and Rashi doesn't answer it. Then he brings the Rebbe Rashab's pshat. Now the Rebbe Rashab's pshat makes more sense, because the Rebbe Rashab's pshat is focusing that the Niflaos Gedelos are not, so to speak, up there, and the Niflaos Gedelos are down here, that in this dark world, there's Gili Elokus, and Gili Elokus is such a level of Avad that nobody appreciates how great it is except for the Eibishter himself. But the Rashi's pshat, which seems to be defining the greatness how Hashem created the world, the previous Rebbe questions. So the Rebbe says, no, you don't understand what Rashi's saying. Rashi is not saying that the greatness of the Eibishter that he made is man and Makom. Rashi is saying is, if you take the greatest creations that Hashem made, which are represented by Shamayim and Arat and Shemesh V'Yerech, Manach and Zman, and then add that it's Asiyah. It's not more than Asiyah. That the biggest aspects of the Eibishter's creation are not more than the Madrega of Asiyah. And this is a Pella. That although the Eibishter is unbelievably great, and he's made very great things, and he is very great, and the Rebbe is going to break it down. You have a bunch of points. If you look at your margin, I wrote, you have Pella, you have Niflaos, you have Niflaos Gedelos, you have Niflaos Gedelos Levade, and then you have Hu Shmei Bilvad. There's going to be 4 or 5 different points that the Rebbe is going to present over the next 3 pages. The rest of page Mem Zayin and all of page Mem Chesed, the first half of page Mem Tes. And all the things the Rebbe is going to say are represented by the words Niflaos Gedelos Levade. And when he's finished with all of that, he say all of these incredible things for the Eibishter, it's all nothing. It's all Asiyah. So we're flipping it around. That the pshat in this pasuk, as Rashi is explaining it, does not bring out how great a creation, Shamayim v'Aretz or Shemesh v'Yerech, how great a creation space and time are, but as great a creation as they may be, l'gabe the Eibishter, it's only Liosei. And that is going to explain Rashi's pshat in the pasuk. But it's going to explain something else also. that you have to join Rashi's pshat on the pasuk with the Rebbe Rashab pshat on the pasuk. That even though Niflaos, Gedeles, Levade is only Liosei, there is an idea of revealing a lakus in this world which is higher than all of that. In other words, the Baal Shem Tov's pshat, which the Rebbe Rashab brings, that Hashem does down here in the Niflaos, in a way that Levade, only the Eibishter knows the greatness of the Niflaos, is the answer to Rashi's pshat. Rashi said that the greatest things the Eibishter made are nothing more than Asiyah, and then we say that we can do something which is a pella, even Lagabe that, which is the second pshat to bring a lakus into this world. And as you'll see in this Mamer on the bottom of page Memtes, at the top of page Nun, this is the idea of Makat Shishmel. That's how this Mamer is gonna go. You have a pasuk and two pirush, Rashi's pirush and the Baal Shem Tov's pirush. Rashi's pirush says the world, even the greatest things in the creation are nothing. And the Baal Shem Tov's pirush is saying, and a yid can come along and enhance even the lowest of this world and bring to it something which is higher than the highest of the creations, which the Eibishter considers nothing. That's the flow, that's the Hemshech of this Maimon. So the Rebbe is, so to speak, helping the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimon along by saying that the Frierdiker brought Rashi, and he asked Kasha. Then he brought the Baal Shem Tov and the Rebbe Rashab with a different pshat. But if you'll tweak what the Baal Shem Tov is saying a little drop, you'll realize that what he's bringing for the Baal Shem Tov and the Rebbe Rashab is not separate from the first pshat, it's actually an enhancement of the first pshat. It's the biggest creation of the Eibishter, only Asiyah. And yet, a Yidus Makat Shishmecha could be Mamshech Apella into the Eibishter's creation. And the Rebbe continues. Says the Heilige Rebbe V'yuvon Zeh to explain the second pirush, the pirush of the Baal Shem Tov which the Rebbe Rashab brings, that the Pella is Kiliyei Lamchaste, that the greatest Mvelakus could come into the lowest worlds. Let's first explain what it says in Tanya. The pirush Apostle can explain in the Apostle Kulam B'chochma Asis. That it says in Tanya, and I want you to know, I'm a big boy. I've been learning Hasidus for how many years now? Well, I started learning Hasidus was probably 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago, close to 45 years ago. I started learning my bar mitzvah. Yeah, 45 years I'm learning Hasidus. In the second Pedic of Tanya, Dagah, you have K'meshekosov Kulam B'chochma Sisa, that Chochma Datzilus is Kasiya Gufnes Etzli Yizbarach. Right in the very beginning of Tanya, you have many places. And I always wondered this kvetch. The Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya is obsessed with this idea that Kula B'chochma Sisa, all of the highest creations, Agabe the Eivit are only Asiyah. And I have to tell you that my gut feeling is that the reason the Alter Rebbe is so into this vart, that even the highest creations of the highest worlds, Agabe the Eivit are only Asiyah, it's Mistama Teira from the Magid, although I don't know. But here he brings it from the Pnima, the Tanya, from the Shara Yichad V'Amunah. Shalagabe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that next to the Eibishter, Gam Madrega is the Chochma, the level of Chochma, which means Chochma and Atzilus. She Madrega Yesen Nailis is the highest level, the highest world. Nechsheves, it's considered Ki'ilu, as if he bechinos Madrega Asiyah Bavad, next to the Eibishter, it's like Asiyah, which is Madrega Yesen Tachtenu, which is the very lowest of levels. And that's the Pshat in the Pasuk. Liosei Niflaos Gedelos Lavadi. That the Liosei Niflaos Gedelos Lavadi means Shagam the Niflaos Gedelos, the greatest of wonders, that they're so great that they're Lavadi, which are even Lamayla Mimadregas HaChochma, even higher than Chochma. Nechshavim Etzlei Yizbarach, the Eibishter that considered the Bechinas Asiyah Liosei Bilvad. That's the Pshat in Rashi. Rashi is not trying to build up the Niflaos. He's building up the Niflaos to say that as great as those Niflaos are, the Emes says it's all Liosei, it's only Asiyah. But there's more. And the more is the Kili Elam Chaste. Kili Elam Chaste, the Pirush of the Baal Shem Tov, that on the one hand, the highest creation of the God of the Eibush is only Asiyah. On the other hand, being Magala Lakus in this world, the way the Eibush is doing, is a Pele, even Lagabe, the fact that the highest creation is only Asiyah. So the Rebbe now goes point by point. He's going to explain the Pasuk Niflaos, Gedeles, Levade, and each point is going to go higher and higher and higher and say the Rishtashlos to bring out that Niflaos and Gedelos and Levade are talking about the highest creations. And each time he's going to say that Niflaos, Gedelos, Levade is speaking about the highest creations, he's going to say again by all the rest of the Gavdei B'Shes Kodesh, to Asiyah. And then he's going to say, Kili Elam Chaste Zapel. Because Adiyah Makache Shmecha, Ukafishi is Balakama, as you're going to see later on. And that's what's going to happen now. Okay? But before we continue, I guess I want to give an introduction. I was wanted to verbring of Reb Mendel of Hashem. Reb Mendel Futafas is one of the tziyurim that I was able to see and to hear from that generation. There are not many people from that generation that I was able to see, but Reb Mendel I was able to see. I really was able to see Reb Mendel. And Reb Mendel hat einmal verbracht. Und then Reb Mendel used to repeat things he heard from Chassidim from the earlier generation. And he was bringing about Stima de Chol. You have in Chassidus from Zayah, Stima de Chol. What does Sosa mean? Madregas of Elikus that are so deep that from us they're hidden. And then you have Stima de Chol means that if you would know what the Sosim knows, you would know that even the Gabi de Sosim, there are other things which are Sosim from it. So he must have heard this melted Chassidim and he repeated it, and Gedake B'Kodesh Mendel, everything was a Litzanis, everything was a Vort. He would bang on the table, he would do the tips of finger. It was his mode, but he would bang on the table with the finger. Aklal, this was his expression, Aklal, of steaming is Arachmanas, Mendel said. Of steaming is Arachmanas. On the level of a godness, which is called steaming, it's Arachmanas. Why? Me and you, we're nobody. We're nobody. Okay, so we're nobody, we know we're nobody. But steaming the Chaganzi Yachibadam, steaming, the level of godness, which is called secret, mysterious, hidden, is such a high level of godness, it's called Sosim. And then you tell Mr. Steeman that Lagabe is steaming, the whole steaming, you're a nobody. In other words, he's trying so hard to be epis and he's garnished. This is Mendel said a word. I'm sure there was an avoida point, but this was the word that I remember him saying, that of steaming is Arachmanas, the levels of godness that are so high that they're considered great. But there are levels much higher than it, that relative to those even higher levels, the great levels are garnished of Zeir Rachmanis. The reason I'm mentioning this is because this is what's about to happen. Right? It's such a silly thing to say, but it's not silly at all. It's unbelievably earnest. We're talking about the Eibishter. We're talking about God. Aber Taka the Eibishter where a child knows the Eibishter. So, Lagabe the Eibishter, was hat betref? Next to Hashem, what? Is there anything that you could say has any value? And of course, the correct answer to that question is nothing has a betref. With Lagabe the Eibishter, you don't say, Yeise mimashe ein arech asir Lagabe Atzilas, ein arech Atzilas Lagabe ein seif. You say Atzilas v'Atziyah Shavin. When you're talking about the Eibishter himself, you don't say, well, the distance between Atziyah and Atzilus is less than Atzilus and Ein Seif, because then at least you're creating a relative measure. You say, Lagabe the Eibishter, the highest world and the lowest world, it's all nothing. And not only the highest world and the lowest world, nothing, the highest Madregas of Elikus that exists, Levad, they're also nothing. In other words, when you're talking about the Eibishter, there's no such thing as saying that there's a level that you could call a Pele, that you call it a Godel, and you call it Levade. Even the highest madrig is a very safe lifnei tzimtzum, and that's the meaning of this pasuk. Liosei, that the minute you're talking about creation, whatever it is asiyah, even if flies, and even if flies gedelis, and even if flies gedelis lavadi lagabe de eibish, that it's nothing. In other words, bekolas, there's atzilus and higher than atzilus, right? There's after the tzimtzum and lifnei tzimtzum. In lifnei tzimtzum the madrigas of gila l'kus which are metzias, and then you have madrigas which are l'kus of b'chal not a metzias of eir. When you're talking about the Eibishter, nobody's close and nobody's far, we're all nothing. And that's the pshat in the pasuk Liosei. You should know, everything is asiyah as far as Eibishter is concerned. This world, which is asiyah, is obviously no big deal, it's only this world. But even the flies, and gedelas, and levade, the Gabe de Eibish is the zelben Liosei. That's what the Rebbe is going to say, literally over the next 2.5 pages. So he's going to speak the Maila of Niflaos in 2 points, Pella and then Niflaos. Then he's going to speak the additional Maila of Gedelos, which is going to be a 3rd Maila. Then he's going to speak the Maila of Levade, which is going to be a 4th Maila. And then you'll see that it's connected to the shame, but not shame which is lower than Eir, shame which is higher than Eir, which is going to be a 5th Maila. And these are talking about very high levels. The lowest of these high levels is Keser. And the highest of these high levels is the deepest madregas of Eitzei Fefnei HaTzimtzum. And all of them are Asiyah. All of them are Asiyah. And then he's going to say, Ki Leilam Chasdei is a Pella. Makache Shmech. That's how this Maimir is going to develop. So I just want to add one more criteria to this, which is that when you learn Chassidus, one of the lines which is drawn in Havana is Kadman and Mechudish. Things that are creations, that before they were created, they were not existent. And ideas in Elokus which always existed. Even though we're not talking about the Eibush, you're talking about the Elokus. Eibush, the Elin is. But the nature of their existence is either Kadman, Kakadmusi, Yizbarech, or Kmei Kadmei HaHeded, but there are things that always existed. In this Shtikil Maimer, that he's calling even the highest Madregas of Elokus, Asiya, he's even including those levels of godliness that are Achla Nivra Ha'elam, Acha Netzla, Tzilas Ha'elyon Ha'yehu Shmei. He's speaking even about Madregas of Elokus, that besides being very, very high, are not even part of creation. They're part of what's called Shleimus Ha'atzmus. Kadmei Kakadmusi Yizbarech, Kmei Kadmei HaHeded, whatever the case is, they're only Asiya. And after all of that, the Kil Elam Chasdei is going to become a Pella, as you'll see at the end of today's class, with Hashem's help and Mitzvah Hashem. So let's continue. On page Nun Mem Zayin, we're holding next to, in your text, it's the number 13, where it says, Dehine Pella. Now, understand what's going to happen. The Rebbe is going to go through a series of points, from lowest to highest. And at each point, he's going to say, don't be impressed, it's just Asiyah. Then it's go to a higher point, and you say again, don't be impressed, it's just Asiyah. Higher and higher, till the highest Madregas of Lavad. And he begins, the Hine, first of all, Pella. Pella is Lamayla Me Chochma. The word Pella, or wonder, is above Chochma. As you know, the Rebbe spoke about this. Achar Kedeshim and Emer and Nun Aleph, when he spoke about the name of Mashiach, that Geula is adding an Aleph to Goyla, so you have Geula. And Aleph means Alufish Elel, the master of the world. Aleph means Ulfan of Alimud, Alefcha Chochma Lechabina, to learn and understand. And Aleph is Lashon Pella, which means wonder. So when you write Aleph Lashon Alufish Elel, that's the lowest Madrega. When you write Aleph Lashon Ulfan of Alimud, that's the second Madrega. And when you write Aleph Lashon Pella, that's the highest Madrega. So the Rebbe says Pella, the word Pella, which means wonder, is higher than Chochma. Because Imei says the Pella, Hemei says the Aleph, the same words. Aleph, which means to learn, and Pella, which means wonder, are both the same letters. Miloshan Ulfan of Alimud Chochma, Mikoma Kamez the Betid of Shen, the rearrangement of the letters. Instead of putting the Aleph first, you put the Pei first, is made Al Pella, Shalamayel Chochma. The word Pella alone is above Chochma. So before you have Levade, before you have Gedelis, before you have Niflaos, you just have one Pella. It's higher than Chochma Vatzilas. So the lowest Madrega that this pasuk is talking to is Keser. And the pasuk says Liosei. Keser of Atzilas, Asiya, Gemura, Lagabe, Yizbarach. But then he says a second Madreg. Niflaos is a Malagam Pella. The word Niflaos is Pella with an extra Nun. So Niflaos is even higher than Pella. Kumavur, Bezeir, Bepidush HaKosov. The Zeir explains on the pasuk. Ki Meiteis Cham Etzam and Niflaos. That Niflaos is Nun Plois. There's Pella, which means a wonder, and Niflaos means 50 wonders. In other words, wonders from the Madrega of Shara Chamishim of Bina, which is Pnimis of Pnimis HaKesed, which is Lamaila Mimemtash Shara Bina Shniver Be'am. There's 49 gates of wisdom in the world. The 50th gate is above. It's even higher than Kesed. So now you have two levels. Pella is Kesed. Nun Plois is the deepest Madrega Besach Nesiv Leidoya Ayet. It's the Shara Chamishim of Bina, which is the highest Madregas of Pnimis HaKesed. And that's Niflaos. And that's also only Liosei. Lagabe, the Eibishter, Keser Bechlal, and the Pnimis Madregas of Atika Kedisha Befrat are only Liosei. But then he adds more. It's not just Pella, and not just Niflaos, but Niflaos Gedelos. You're dealing with the kind of wonders. It's not only Stama wonder. It's a wonder in the Madrega of Nun Plois. Moreover, it's the wonder in the Madrega of Nun Plois, the Madrega of Gedelos, which is Lamayla Niflaos Tam. It's above ordinary wonders, because it's considered a great wonder. The pasuk says further, Lois and Niflaos Gedelos. Afilu Nifla is Gedela. It's not just Pella, also Nifla. And not just Nifla, but Nifla Godel, Nechshavim Etzel Yizbarach, Lebechinas Asiya, they're considered Asiya Levad only. So you see what he's doing? He's explaining the words to be very high levels. And no matter how high a level he is, it's no big deal, only Liosei. So far we had 3 levels, Pella, Niflaos, and Niflaos Gedelis, and all 3 of them, the Gabbai de Eibush did is only Asiya. And he explains it briefly, 3 lines in the bottom of page Mem Zayin, to understand what it means that we're saying that Pella and Nifla Godel is only Asiya. Says the Rabbi, you have to understand there's a very big difference between Hashem's involvement in the world and the level of limited light and life which is revealed to the world according to the measure of the world, which is Anhagas Ateva, which is natural. Parenthesis, She'ein Ze'in Shel Pella, which does not require wonder. And then there's Anhagas Shemitzad Bechin, a save of Kalam, that Hashem is involved in the world from the level of godness which is indirectly in relationship with the world. It's above the world, which is Anhagas Shalamayla Me'ateva, which is above nature, which is Pella, right? Pella. And then it's Niflaos. Now you go to page Memchas, and this Niflaos Gedelis. So miracles are higher than Teva. And in miracles are higher than Teva, you have at least 3 madreges. You have Pella, you have Nifla, and you have Nifla Godel. And Vachidish Bazehu, and this pasuk is saying, Venish Nispal, the Leizu Bavad, it's not only. Shebachin is a Malak Alam, and Nechshav Etzli is Baruch Lebachin Asasiya Bavad, not only is Malak Alam. Next to the Eibishter, considered like Asiya, like nothing. As the Pasuk says, Kulam b'chokhma sisa fila chokhma datzilos nechshaves asleikas v'yegufnis etzayis barach. And now we're including not just chokhma datzilos. We're including keser, pnimis keser, and the Niflaos Gedelis, al-shagam, b'chin the kalam, the highest madreges of elikus, that are so far removed from the world, that the relationship with the world is indirect, is nechshaves etzayis barach b'chin Asiya barach, considered Asiya l'eis Niflaos Gedelis. So he's translating what Niflaos Gedelis means, and he's saying, Venish Nispal, it's all Liosei. But he's not finished. There's another Madrega. And the other thing is Levade. Levade is going to be the next couple of paragraphs. What he's going to add in the Levade is Eidin Seif Shel Lifnei HaTzimtzum. Pella, Nifla Godel are Keser, and Pnimis HaKeser, and Pnimis of Pnimis HaKeser as they are La'achar HaTzimtzum. Now he's going to say that even Eidin Seif Shel Lifnei HaTzimtzum, which is called Levade, is also Liosei. No big deal. Umashakos of Leis Niflaos Gedelis Levade. So, but Levade Daika all by himself with emphasis. Yeshakash and Mashakos of them. Let's tie it into the first pasuk of Atar Reis. Shalachar of Eima pasuk Leis Niflaos Gedelis Levade. It's the second pasuk, but Leis Niflaos Gedelis is the second pasuk. Atar Reis Ladas Gavayu Lekim Ein Eid Levade is the second pasuk. And both of them finish with the same word, right? Atar Reis Ladas. Hashem hu lekim ein eid levade leis neflas delos levade. Both of them have the word levade. So atar reis levade has a meaning. Kavayu lekim has a meaning, and levade has a meaning. And if you know what levade in the first pasuk means, you'll be able to understand the neflas delos levade in the second pasuk. At the first pasuk it says atar reis du at muhus ein sei baruch reis azich bavis. Das, as mir sollen dir wissen, was sollen wir wissen? First of all, Kavayu Lakim, that the Madrega Velakus, which is Tzimtzum, Madrega, which is Gil, is one and the same thing. And then on a higher level, still Ein Eid Mavada, there's only but the Eibishter himself. Translates the Rebbe V'hainu, that in this pasuk, Kavayu Lakim, and Ein Eid Mavada, there's 2 Madregas. Is the Kavayu Lakim, and the Rebbe Slapi Kabbalah, which is Shema Vai Balei Sebatika. Kavayu Lakim means how Vai goes up into Atik, Primis Akesas, then a Vai starts with Hashem Lakim. But that's the lower Madrega. Havayu Lakim, that means Atzilas goes up in Tatika Kadish. But then you have Yeshna in Yanala Yesek Gamin and Havayu Lakim, there's something which is even higher. Then Malchus of Atzilas being in Madrega Tatika Kadisha, which is Div Eined Mavade Dafka. That are higher than the notion that the godliness, which is close to worldliness, is one with godliness, which is altogether removed from worldliness. There's the notion of there's nothing but God. And what is the meaning of this higher madrega? Ein eid milvade kedu gamay merazal. To explain eid milvade, we must bring in the Pirkei Rabbi Lezer, which says Achal nivra elam hayu shmei bilvad. Before the Eibishter created the world was hu shmei bilvad. And the same way you understand the word bilvade in the pasuk hayu hu shmei bilvad, you understand the word bilvade in the pasuk ein eid milvade. And basically it means that we're talking about a lakus which is pre-tzimtzum. That just like Achla Nivra Elam is translated Achla Netzla Tzilas Elyon before Tzimtzum Rishon. Hayahu Shmei Belvad, the Eibishter had Ein Seif, but the Ein Seif exists alone. As Elakus is Lifnei Atzimtzum, the same is true. Le'eis and Niflaos Gedeles Levade. Eibishter has wonders and 50 wonders and great 50 wonders, and the way they are Levade Lifnei Atzimtzum. Says the Rebbe al Derech Zavashagos of Kan Le'eis and Niflaos Levade means that the wonders of the Eibishter, which we have Pele, Nifla Godel, is Levade the way it stands Lifnei Atzimtzum. Move on this leads us to understand how incredible the meaning of this statement is. That not only Pele but also Nifla, not only Nifla but Nifla Godel, not only Nifla Godel but Nifla Godel Levad, which was getting safe Lifnei Atzimtzum. Legabe the Eibishter is Liosei. That Afilu Niflaos Gedeles Levad, Shehem Levade, the wonders of Hashem, Keser and Pnimis Keser, and even higher, as they are alone Lifnei Atzimtzum, which is consistent with the Pirkei Rabbi Lezer's Chayosh Me Belvad. Hine Legabe Etzmusi is Barach, next to the Eibishter is Asiyah Belvad. So that's how you read a pasuk. Niflaos is 2 madreges, Gedelos the 3rd madrege, Levad is in Seif Shefnei Atzimtzum. Even the Seif Shefnei Atzimtzum, which exists alone, is only Asiyah Gufnus Asiyah Barach. But he's not done. He's not done. You have 4 madreges: Pele, Nifla Godel, and Levade, right? But he wants to say a 5th madrege, and the 5th madrege is in Perek Gimel. But we're going to go backwards. In order to explain the word Levade, Le'eis and Niflaos Gedeles Levade, we brought 2 sources, right? We brought Ein Eid Mevade from the pasuk, and we brought the Hu Shmei Belvad from the Pirkei Rabbi Lezer. That included in the pasuk Le'eis and Niflaos Gedeles Levade is the madrega of Levade in the Piskam of Pirkei Rabbi Lezer, Ach Nivra Elam Hayahu Shmei Belvad. And the Rebbe is going to do an about face. He's going to do a 180. He's going to change his mind on something. And in changing his mind, he's going to enhance the Levade considerably compared to how we understood the Levade until now. Let me give you a brief introduction. This Mamer, was mentioned in the Mamer of Sukkot. Right? You know there's 3 Maimarim on Sukkot. The first Mamer was on Lulav, second Mamer was on Sukkot, the third Mamer started with Sukkot and ended with Lulav. The middle of the 3 Maimarim, which was the Mamer that the Rebbe said the second day Yom Tov of Sukkot, was B'Sukkot Teishu B'Shivas Yom called Elzeh B'Sal Yeshu B'Sukkot. And in that Mamer, the Rebbe spoke about the idea of Makat Shishmecha, which we're going to see later on. But he also brought this Piskam of the Pirkei Rabbi Lezer, Ach Nivra Elam Hayahu Shmei Belvad. And he explained the 2 words, Oyer and Shame. And he argued that Oyer is the higher madrege and Shame is the lower madrege. Because Oyer is Me'ein HaMoyer and Shame is Chitzenius, that's Nifne V'Chalatz Musei. And that's what it was. In that Maimon, which for us is 3 Maimarim ago, because since B'Sukkos Teishu Shivas Yom we had the Maimer Chag Asuris Tasa L'cha Shivas Yom, and then we had the Mamer that we learned yesterday, which is not really a Mamer, just a Rishimas Dvarim, Breishis. So 3 Maimarim ago we had this Pirkei Rabbi Lezer, Achel Nivra Elam Hayahu Shmei Belvad. And in that Mamer, that made it very clear that Oyer is higher than Shem. Because Oyer is Mein HaMoyer and Shem is Nivdal, because it's Nifne and so on and so forth. Here, now if we go with that approach, we go with that gang, so you have 4 levels: Pele, Nifla Godel, and Belvade. And Levade includes Shem, Lifnei Atzimtzum, like it says in the Pirkei Rabbi Lezer. Here the Rebbe is going to bring the same sugya, but he's going to go exactly the opposite. In our Maimir, we're going to argue that Shem is higher than Oyer and not lower than Oyer. Actually, Nivra Elam Hayahu Ushmoi Belvad. So on one level, the idea that included in Liosei, there's only Asiyah Gufnus, Asiyah Barach, is only Shem, which is lower than Oyer. And we're going to now say that it includes also Shem, which is higher than Oyer. So you can end up with 5 qualitative levels in Elikus, the lowest of which is going to be Keser. Pele, Nifla Godel, Levade where Shem is lower than Oyer, and then we're going to have now Levade where Shem is higher than Oyer. And even this highest level, where Shem is higher than Oyer, Lagabe Atzmas is only Asiyah. Asiyah Gufnus, Asiyah Barach, Le'esei, Niflaos Gedeles Levade. So the Rebbe continues, Pei the Gimel U'Birin, and Hine, Ba'mayim, the Pirkei Rabbi Lezer. Now, we just brought a Maimah from the Medish of Pirkei Rabbi Lezer. Achle Nivra Elam Hayahu Shmei Belvad, B'Dayak Le Mishmoi. He calls godliness by the word, which means Eibishter's name. Inyan Hashem dafka v'la inyan er. We refer to godliness as Hashem's name rather than godliness being Hashem's light. That afal pisha bekama mekemis ein mechalkam and shem le'ed in many maimorim. They use the word shame and ed, and sometimes the word malchus interchangeably. Ed is a levush v'atzmus, shame is a levush v'atzmus, malchus is a levush v'atzmus. We say they mean the same thing. Here, we're going to say they mean different things. But in contrast to the Sukkos Teshuvah, where we said that Oid and Shem mean different things and Oid is the higher Madrege, here we're going to say that Oid and Shem mean two different things and Shem is the higher Madrege. And by saying that Shem is the higher Madrege, you're going to have in Levade alone two levels. There's going to be Pella, there's going to be Nun Pella, Nifla, there's going to be Nifla Godel, then there's going to be Belvade, which is Shem lower than Oid, which is how we understood it in the Mamer before. And now he's going to add in this Perek Gimel Shem, which is higher than Oid. And here's how he explains it. Says the Rebbe, Shayadei ha'oir, when you bring on Ein Seif, Nimshach ha'moir atzme, you have a perfect copy, a perfect reflection of the source, but the source itself with a capital S is not represented. Mash Enken Hashem, when you call the Eibishter by his name, Nimshach ha'etzem, bring on the Eibishter as he is by himself. Now this didn't say in the previous Mamer. Fakert. The previous Mamer spoke the mile of Eid over Shem. And this Mamer turns it around and says he's speaking with the mile of Shem over Eid. And he explains, logically, the notion of Eid Ein Seif, which is Eid Mein Amoy, should be seen as being higher than Eibishter's name. Why? It shouldn't be compared at all. In other words, Eid should be considered much higher than Shem. The whole kinds of light is that me'ein, the same color, the same likeness of the Eibishter is in the Eid Ein Seif. When you know Eid Ein Seif, you know what the Moir must be, at least with that Hechrech Sichli. Hashem, the Eibishter's name, like the name of a person, does not tell us about the essence of that person. Should we just find by Kamba, when they are the Mekron basic Shem, many people can have the same name, Av She'ein Dimya B'Neim, on the surface, you don't see how they're the same. So 2 people, or 3 people, or 10 people with the same name look so different and act so different and define so differently because the relationship between the name of a person and the actions of a person is very remote. This is an additional proof. The name of a person does not have a relationship with the very substance of the person. It's very superficial. Because it has nothing to do with the person as he is by himself. I just went to page Memtes at the top, because your name is not defining who you are. Your name is simply a means of identifying you, of calling you. So on this basis, Shem is lower and Oid is higher, and that's how it was explained in the previous Mamer. But now the Rebbe says, there's another way of looking at it. And the other way of looking at it is, Dafka, when you call a person by his name, you can call the person himself. Because even though the name of a person is so far removed from the person, that knowing his or her name doesn't tell you very much about the person, it actually draws the whole person in your direction. First of all, gives 2 examples. First example is, you see by other Misav, a person who faints. You whisper his name into his ear, he wakes up from his faint. And the fact that you can bring a person back from a faint by calling his name is a simon, that the name of the person touches the person even deeper than what his faint is from. If a person has not fainted, even while he's wide awake and well and healthy, says the when you call a person by his name, the person turns to one who calls him his entire etzem. With the Rebbe that Tzemach Tzedek as a little boy and the Alter Rebbe. The famous story. Tzemach Tzedek was a little baby, a yingele, and he was sitting on the Alter Rebbe's lap, and he was playing with the Alter Rebbe's beard, and he was caressing the beard of the Alter Rebbe, and he was saying affectionately, he was caressing the Alter Rebbe's beard, saying Zayde. And the Alter Rebbe says to him, das is not the Zayde, das is the Zayde's board, this is not the Zayde, this is the Zayde's beard. So he grabbed the Alter Rebbe's nose. Alter Rebbe had a prominent nose. He said Zayde. Right, and the Lomdim are going to say the halachas you have in a get to Egla Arufa, that the life of the person is in the nose. So he says Zayde. So the Alter Rebbe says, das is nicht the Zayde, das is the Zayde's nose. This is not the Zayde, this is the Zayde's nose. So he grabbed one of those big prominent eyebrows that you see in the picture, and he said Zayde, and the Alter Rebbe said again, das is nicht the Zayde, das is the Zayde's bremen, this is not the Zayde, the Zayde's eyebrows. So he grabbed one of the payas. Anyway, the Tzemach Tzedek realized that he's not going to find the Zayde sitting on his lap. Whatever he's going to touch is going to be apart. So he went into the next room, he threw something on the floor. It made a big noise, like as if something had fallen. And he started to scream Zayd as if he had gotten hurt. So Alter Rebbe panicked. He ran in to see what happened to his grandson. And as soon as he ran into the room, the Tzemach Tzedek came out and he said to him, this is the Zayda. Now don't tell me you're not the Zayda, because I didn't call Noz, I didn't call Bord, I didn't call Bremen, I didn't call Peyes. I called Zayda and you came. That's the pshat. Nifla b'chalatz musay. When you call someone by his name and he turns, all of him turns. And the same is with the Eibishter. When you call the Eibishter by his name and he responds, it's atzmus mus mamish, like a child who calls his father. So in this way, shame is higher than oir. And this is the argument that Rebbe now makes. Mash'enken be'eir umar, 4 lines from the top of page Mem Tez. Sha'adei ha'oir lo nimshach ha'moir atzmei. The light of Elokus, which is me'ein amon, all of its milas, but we know from Chassidus that it emerges from the moir memela. It's only a ha'ora. And at least in terms of Gilui, the moir is not available in the air. The Yesh Amiti is not available in the air. But in shame it is. In the Eibish's name it is. So in contrast to the last Mamer, where we made shame lower than oir, and therefore we have to explain Mekachi Shmech as we did in the Mamer of Sukkot Teishu, here we're going to make shame higher than oir. That the name of the Eibush is an allusion to him as he is, it is etzim above the Madrega V'Emen Amoyer. And we're going to say that even that is Liosei. But the Gemara says, L'maylo, the idea of shame, which is on the surface lower than Eid, but under the surface higher than Eid, is the union of Sfiras HaMalchus. Sfiras HaMalchus, the Eibish's Melucha, is not the Emen Amor. Fakert, it's separate. Shikamayin Hashem, Shemayez, Bechinas Nekud, the Belvad Malchus, only a single point. Because Shor Shalamal Mekala Sfiras, its root comes from higher than all the Sfiras. And it's Moshesh's Bedat Law, which is in Esnas's Atmis, which is why Malchus has no tzir. Malchus is in a Kuda Achaz, who the Tachas Ayesed, and you have to have binyan Malchus near the Sfiras. Because Sfiras, Malchus, has a very deep connection to the Eibishter in the way it manifested separate from the Eibishter. So of all the Esses Sfiras, Malchus is the closest thing to shame, which means it's the closest thing to something which comes from Hashem, but is not reflecting him. But on the other hand, there's something which comes from Hashem, that when you touch it, he himself responds. That's what the Pirkei Rebbe is saying. Before the Eibush created the world, he existed with his name. And Chassidus bring from Kabbalah that not just actually Nivra Elam, but actually Netzel Atzilos. I think they bring from the Vedas HaKedesh that before Atzilos was created, means before the Tzimtza V'Rishon, Hu Shmei Bilvad, but not Hu Shmei Bilvad, a low level like in the previous Maimon. But Hu Shmei Bilvad means a high level, even higher than the Yin of Eimein Amoyer. Mitzad Mailas Hashem, the upside of the Eibishter's name. When you call the Eibishter by his name, the etzem of what the Eibishter is brought forward. The very highest name of the Eibishter. Be'efen the hu shmei b'vad, where the name of the Eibishter exists by the Eibishter as it is by himself. And he explains, there is the name of the Eibishter, or of a person that's already been called. We have the name of a person before he's been called by his name. But he already has the name, and you have even deeper, the name of a person before it was used. It's only there in theory. That yesh kvar mitzias Hashem behelam, before a person is called by a name and before a person is given a name, he already has a name, and the name where the person has it before he's given the name. The name, the way he has it when the person is called by this name, is the highest madrege. It's called Hu Shmei Bovad. And the reason when you call a person by his name, he turns Chalatz Musik, because that's where the name begins, in the Yetzim. So the Eibishter's name can exist on a level which is lower than Eir. The Eibishter's name exists on a level which is equal to Eir. And the Eibishter's name exists on a level which is higher than the whole phenomenon of Eir. And actually, Nivra Ha'elam, actually, Netzel Atzilos Ha'elam, Hu Shmei Hayu, Hu Shmei B'Vad, means to say that even the Madrigas of Elokus, which are way above the creation, they're not Mechudish, they're Kadmen. Not just Kmei Kadmed, but maybe some level Kadmen Kedlusi is Baruch. Over there also Eibishter has a name, and that name is Levadi. So the Rebbe says, so again, if you want to keep track of the list, you have Pella, you have Nifla, you have Nifla Godel, and then you have two Madrigas in Milvade. The first is Beklolis, it is safe Shofnei Tzimtzum is called Milvade, and Bepratius Shmei Bilvad, the name of the Eibishter Bilvad, which is Bechlal not yet the Metzias, it's a potential to having a name which is a Lukus, which is above air. So Gam Inyan Hashem, even the level of the Eibishter's name, Kfishu Hu Shmei Bilvad, that the Eibishter's name exists before he's called, before he's named, where it's part of Atzmus. Still, Eine Elerak Shem, it's only the Eibishter's name, and it's called Liosei. O kamud yesh b'mamer zeguf, as the pirka the Rebbe itself underscores that kash Hashem hu bebechinas bovad, when the Eibush is named Madrego bovad, still it's not the highest inyan. Harei be'even shesh inyan hu. There is Hashem Himself, which is called hu, and then there is Shmei, which is second. And therefore, Harei inyan Hashem, even the Eibush is named on a Madrego, which is not yet a Matthias of name. You haven't used the name even in that Madrege. Eine be'erech l'gabeat musei. Mamish, the name of the Eibush, the way it exists bovad in lifnei atzimtzum, the Gabe the Eibush himself is. And that's the type Liosei, that even the Pele, Nifla, Godel, Levade, and Shmei Levade, in the way Shem is higher than Oy, Legabe Atzmus and Hus, it's only Asiya. Even Pele and Nifla Godel. Fisha Bechinas, who wish Shmei Levade, Levade, Nifnei Atzimtzum, and Nevadeg is Nifnei Atzimtzum, which is the way Shem is higher than Eir, and that's the first pshat in Liosei Niflaos Gedelos Levade, as it's found in Rashi in the beginning of the Mamer. That Liosei Niflaos Gedelos Levade means the highest madrigas of Ein Seif Lefnei Atzimtzum, even madrigas that are ktumen legabe atmos Liosei. It's all nothing. But then you had the second shot, that even though Liosei Niflaos Gedelos Levade, all the madrigas of Elokus, even the Levade Lefnei Atzimtzum is only Asiya, there is a pella of Kili Elam Chaste. And that's what the Rebbe now says about Makach Shmech in the next paragraph. We just spent 3 pages of Mamer, going higher and higher and higher in Elokus, and saying that all of it Lagabe Eibush there is nothing. And now we're about to say that when a Yid and a Neshama Beguf reveals godliness in this world by dancing HaKofiz, he is called Makach Shmecha. He's adding to the Levade, the Elokus, which is in the highest Madregas of Ne'at Tzimtzum, which is only Madrega of Asiya, a Pele. Now this is the turning point. This is the turning point in the Mamer. Until now, it was all about Liosei Niflaos Gedelos Levade, that no matter how high you go in Elokus, after Tzimtzum, before Tzimtzum, Mechudesh, Kadmoin, Shmoi, which causes the Eibush to be painted b'chol atzmusei. Even on the highest levels, right? He brings 3 madregas, the madrega of Shmoi. The way it's revealed, the way he has it for himself, and the word before the name is even identified, all of this is considered Liosei. In other words, when you think about what the Eibushter is, anything which is not the Eibushter is incomparably less. Even if you're talking about godliness, which is not for the sake of worldliness, and even if you're talking about godliness that doesn't even yet have a Matthias. When you juxtapose godliness next to God, nothing has a Matthias. And of course, all of that is consistent with the questions that the Rebbe asked on the Rashi's Pirush in Liosei Niflaos Gedelos Levade. But now comes the answer. And the answer, although it's familiar in Chassidus, is always overwhelming. It's always extraordinary, as common as it is in our Rebbe's Maimonim. And the answer is going to be that the exception to the rule of Niflaos Gedelos Levade is being Asiya, that anything but God is next to God, like Asiya Gufnis Etzei Yizbarach, is a Yid. Because the Yid is one of the Eibushter. And although in this Mamer the Rebbe doesn't spell it out, we know from the Mamer of the Rebbe, Rosh Hashanah Mamer of the Rebbe, one of the favorite Torahs that the Rebbe quotes in my years, probably every single year in the Mamer of Rosh Hashanah, was the Torah Samaged about B'mi Nimlach, B'nishvitzeim Shel Yisrael. In short, it translates to Yidden Amusha Shanatzim Musamos, Yidden with the Eibushter. The oneness of a Yidden with the Eibushter is compared to a child that's imprinted in the memory of his father in the kind of way that the father could never forget, compounded by the fact that by the Eibushter there's no time. So if you put those 2 points together, that a Yid is chokuk in Me'ach HaZekarn of Elokus K'vayachol, like a Ben Yochid is carved in the mind of his father, and the idea that by Hashem there's no time, that means there's never a point where a Yid is not one with Atzmus and Salvador. And that's the Liosei Niflaos Gedelos Levade, like the Rebbe Rasha brings in the Baal Shem Tov, that there is a wonder that the Eibishter does, which only He fully understands. And this is connected to the Jewish people, and Kili Elam Chaste, that they bring godliness into the world. And the way the Mamer develops it is by bringing us back to the idea of Makache Shmecha. We're holding at the bottom of page Memtes. And we're going to continue to read. Now I know the sheet is long. I don't know how long I'm talking for. An hour and 20 minutes now, and half it's long. But I'm going to continue. I'm going to read till almost the bottom of page Nun. The Jewish people are called the Mekadesh Hashem. They make a Kiddush Hashem. That's the power of every Jew. Through his avodah, להמשיך, kedusha, neisefes, b'shmo yizbarach, to add additional holiness to the Eibishter's name. Now remember, this idea of Makache Shmecha we had in the Mamer B'Sukkos Teishvu. But in the Mamer B'Sukkos Teishvu, the way he explained Makache Shmecha was predicated on the idea that shame is lower than oir. Because oir is mein amoir, and shame is for the sake of the zula. So shame has to do with the levels of godliness which are close to worldliness. And they need to be enhanced. Makache Shmecha, laskona raz d'shmei. And I talked to you in that shir, in that Mamer, that normally laskona raz d'shmei is understood in ishtalshalus, to add more oires into the kelim of atzilus by being marchev es hakelim. But here the Rebbe said in that Mamer b'Sukkos Teishvu shebas yomim the yid mamshach atzmos into shmoi. But the idea of Makache Shmecha in that Mamer was based on the relationship between shmoi and the world. Here the Rebbe changed his mind. Here the Rebbe made shmoi higher than oir. The shmoi is the idea in Elokus which draws atzmos mamish. And we're talking about shmoi, the idea in Elokus which is which turns the Eibishter and atzmos mamish, the way it's still one with him. In other words, the way it's not how he's turning, but the turner, the mefaneh. And nevertheless we say a yid adds a kedusha to shmoi. A yid adds a holiness to the Eibishter's name on the madrege, where the Eibishter would turn b'chol atzmus if called, but you're not calling him yet because he's in his atzmus, and the yid is able to enhance that. Sharei, emphasis, lacharei kol, la'iloi b'yin Hashem. Notwithstanding that we put shame, the name of the Eibishter, on a pedestal above the whole phenomenon of Ein Seif, and lachaydet means all madreges of Ein Seif. Ad lebechinas hu u'shmei bilvad. We further discussed that we're dealing with the Eibishter's name as the Eibishter's name is by himself, as alone, which means it's not really a name. It's the possibility for a name. As you may or may not know, there's a famous sugi of Chassidus, the sugi of shemes and shame. Shemes, Lashon Rabbi, and shame, Lashon Yochid, which is the mashal that Chassidus uses when it wants to explain koiches, sfiris, on the madrega of Yechelis that has no mitzias whatsoever. Here we're talking the madrega of shame, but there isn't even the shame of shame. In other words, not only is there no mitzias outside of etzem, there isn't even the idea of calling etzem. There's just the idea of calling etzem. The shame, which is the source of shame, on the highest madrege, where he's paying a b'chol atzmusei, said the Rebbe says, "Arei shame sheni berach atzmusei." It's still only the name of the Eibishter, which has no closeness to Atzmus himself. This doesn't make the higoyin. In other words, you think about Matthias. It's very hard to understand. I'm remembering as I'm talking to you, a Mamer that the last Mamer that I said, I'll never forget it. It was Shabbos Nitzavim Tafshin Memches. Right? If you know the history, the Rebbe Tzachai Mushka passed away Chobei Shvat Tafshin Memches. The Shabbos of Shiva, the Rebbe said a Mamer an hour. It was a Machsa Shekel Mamer. It spoke about Neshama and Guf, Tchias HaMeisim. And I thought at that point that now there was going to be a Shinit, there's going to be more Maimarim. But that's not what happened. During the course of Tafshin Memches, the Rebbe reduced the frequency of his saying Chassidus. Towards the second half of the year, he said only Shabbos Mevarchim. He didn't say every Shabbos at the Fabrengen. And then the last Maimir that year, Memches to Memtes, I think was Shabbos Shuvah. He said a Maimir Shabbos Matzei Rosh Hashanah and Shabbos Shuvah, and I think he stopped. Then, of course, Erev Pesach, the Rebbe said a Maimir with a Ning. And then Motzei Pesach, the Rebbe said a Maimir, and then Erev Shuas, Tavshin Memtes, and then the Rebbe stopped saying Chassidus. I've heard from the people who are working with the Rebbe that the Rebbe said that he says a Maimir every Shabbos, and how come they're not delivering it? You know, the Rebbe said in the years after Memches that every Shabbos there's a Rashi, and every Shabbos there's a Bir on Zeir of his father. Bir on his father's Bir was every Shabbos there's a Rambam, and they weren't finding it because the Rebbe was speaking very B'kitzur and very B'havshata, and the Rebbe actually complained, how come they're not bringing him Maimorim? So Nun Aleph, Pashas Noach, which happens to be this week, and Pashas Chayesara, a Mamer was prepared based on the Simchas that Rebbe spoke Tov Shin Nun Aleph. But it was mamish betamtzis, beremez, or bekitzet. The Rebbe was speaking very, very abstractly. But the Rebbe said that I'm saying Chassidus on one hand my morim. But from what we were able to see at Das Tachten, that, so to speak, that was the end of the saying of Chassidus. Now, the Mamer before Rosh Hashanah was a short Mamer. But if I'm not mistaken, in that Mamer also we're speaking about the Ma'aler Yisrael. So he spoke about Erein Seif, and he spoke about Yechelet, and he spoke about Atzmos. And the Rebbe went off into one of those. The Rebbe said it quicker than the way you put together in the Anocha. In the Anocha, they make it's a paragraph and a paragraph. The Rebbe said them one after the other, like a list. And then the Nekuda was, like the Rebbe spoke in Tafshin Mem Hey. You need to have many tzimtzumim to have a metzias of Elamis. You have to have many tzimtzumim to have the idea of a gili of Erein Seif. You have to have many tzimtzumim to have the madrega of Erein Seif. You have to have many tzimtzumim to have the madrega of Yechelis, which is called in Samach Vov, Kadmon Musa Yisbarach. You have to have many tzimtzumim to have in Atzmos the concept of Mo'er. You have to have many tzimtzumim to be able to identify the Eibishter by the name Atzmos, which means, in other words, and the reason I'm bringing it up here, is that as much as we know from Primis HaTorah, from Kabbalah and Chassidus, about Alakus, and about not al Acharat Tzimtzum, but even Lifnei Tzimtzum, and even hard in the Madregas of when you're talking about the Eibishter himself, we know nothing. Like the Rebbe spoke, that ultimately even Mekubalim have a point where you say, Kavod Elakim Haster Dovad and Vash V'chol Tachas L'Shenecha. The secrets have not all been revealed. They reveal more secrets, but next to what's not revealed, all the revealed secrets are inconsequential, insignificant. And as the Rebbe said many times, the word Atzmos doesn't mean the Eibishter, because it's a description. So even when you refer to the Eibishter as Atzmos, which is higher than referring to the Eibishter as Moed, which is the source of even the idea of Yechelis, is a Ribui Tzimtzumim. How and what is beyond our comprehension. We can't understand it. The one thing that we know fundamentally is that at some point the idea of being able to understand, because it's logical, or to use the lashon from Chazal, which is very, very important when you're learning about the Eibishter. We're not learning in free fall. We're not just making up the stuff because it sounds right. But Torah teaches us about these madregas, and that's what you have in Kabbalah. And the Torah of Rabbi Seidna Siyenu, that when the Rabbeim speak about a madrega, of Erein Sof, or whatever the case is, that you don't have from the earlier Rabbeim or the Sifrei Kabbalah, they're not just saying it because it makes sense to them. They're saying it because they see it b'mtzias, as a fact, and it's Kabbalah he, and therefore Makablim, the Kabbalah, and therefore there's madregas of Elokus, which are not just higher than Oyer, they're higher than Yechelis, they're higher than Moyer, and they're higher than Atzmos. And this is how you understand this, that even though we're talking about the Eibishter's name, not after the Eibishter's name has been identified and pronounced, not even the Eibishter's name is a theoretical idea that a Yid is able to call, but the Eibishter's name, though it's part of Atzmos Samhus, it's only Lavade. And therefore there's a concept of Makat Shishma. A Yid adds a Kedusha to the name of the Eibishter, not the Eibishter's name as it is in Ishtalshalos, which is Atzilus. Not just the Eibishter's name as it is in the Madregis, where there's a possibility, where he, so to speak, sets himself up, Kvayachol, he brings him close enough to the world that you could say that he's paying b'chal Atzmusei. But where the Eibishter's name is part of Atzmusei, still, it's after Ribui Tzimtzumim, it's Levadai, and the Yid is Makadesh Shmai. He has Kedusha to that name of the Kodesh Baruch. Why? Because Dafke Yisrael, specifically the Jewish people, their root is Atzmos Samhus. Hine idea Avedas and their avodah. Turn to page. No, Narei Makache Shmoi mean Shabamshich and Kedusha's Atzmos. They add a Kedusha from the idea which is called Atzmos, which is higher than Shem, even on the highest Madregas. And L'chayra, when the Rebbe says here Atzmos, that's a Toyar. There's even higher than Atzmos. And a Yid is able to bring down the truth of the Eibishter into Shmoi, because Yid have the koyach for Kiddush Hashem, Makache Shmoi, to add Kedusha to Shmei Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because we are one with Atzmos Samhus. And this is the Pshat, Le'eis and Niflaos Gedel Zavadei Kili Elam Chaste. All the Madregis of the first half of the Pasuk, Niflaos Gedel Zavadei is Asi, is lower. But Kili Elam Chaste, the idea that we could bring down the Kedusha of the Eibishter into this world, which translates into the idea in context of being Mekadesh as Hashem, to add Kedushas Ha'atzmos, to Kedushas Shmoi, and ultimately that all of those things come down into this world. Here it's Taka Pela, not like the way the Rebbe Rayatz questioned the Rashi's pshat on the pasuk, but how the Rebbe Rayatz then, so to speak, answers that question by bringing the Rebbe Rashab's quote, or the Baal Shem Tov's quote, of La'is Niflaos deals about the wonder from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the wonders of HaKadosh Baruch Hu only He knows. And what is the wonder of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that only He knows? It's Kili Elam Chaste. It's the koyach that the Eibishter gave Yidden, who are one with Him, Mamish, to be Mekadesh as Hashem. Shall say never regarding this is written Ata Kodesh v'Shimcha Kodesh u'Gedei Shimcha Yim Elucha Kodesh. That not only the Eibishter is Kodesh, but His name is Kodesh and Yidden are Kodesh. And again, if you remember the Mamer of Sukkos Teshu, the Rebbe in that Mamer separated Ata Kodesh v'Shimcha Kodesh u'Gedei Shimcha Yim Elucha Sela from Kodesh Ata V'nei Shmecha. And he said that when you say Ata Kodesh v'Shimcha Kodesh, the name of the Eibishter is as holy as Ata, even though it's two madregas. Mashenkim, when you say Kodesh Ata v'nei Shmecha, so only Ata is Kodesh and Neda is in a lower madrega. So in that Mamer, he said the idea that Yidna Mekadesh as Hashem is talking about the madrega of Shem in this pasuk of v'nei Shmecha, not in the pasuk v'Shimcha Kodesh. Here again, the Rebbe is changing that although in the Mamer of Shabbos Chalamei Sukkos, although in the Mamer of the second day of Sukkos, of Tafshin Lamed Dalet, which is the middle of the Yom Kippur Milchama, and there's no doubt that the Rebbe spoke these Divrei Torah, because these Divrei Torah have a koyach of shlit over the world, that there should be the inyan of Haluas ad Hashem kol goyim shabchu kol u'om higavar aleinu chas tevemes avai leilam halulukah. And the malachim of the goyim are mispalel and protect Yidden, who mail the goyim begashmias, protect Yidden and help them in every way possible till there's a complete nitzachim. So in that Maimir, the Rebbe said that the idea of Mekadesh Shmecha is the name of the Eibishter, which is outside Kedushas Ha'atzmos. Kodesh Ata v'nei Shmecha. Here the Rebbe is saying that Yidna Mekadesh as Hashem, which is in Kedushas Ha'atzmos. Ata Kodesh Hashem is holy. Shimcha Kodesh, His name is holy. U'Gedei Shimcha Yim Elucha Sela. Yidden who are able to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu are also Kodesh. But the Gedei Shimcha Yim Elucha Sela, the Kedusha of Yidden, is that they be Mekadesh as Hashem. That even Shmai, which is in the Madrega of Shimcha Kodesh, a Yid is Makadesh even more by adding an even higher inyan to Shmai, which is already one with Atzmos and Mosein Salbaro. So Higoyen I don't have, but the math that the Pshat La'is Niflaos is about the Kili Elam Chaste is the idea that Yid should be Makadesh as Hashem includes being Makadesh as Hashem, which is one with Atzmos and Mosein Salbaro. And he now connects it to this ban. This idea that the avoid of Yidden in general is to add Kedusha to the Eibishter's name, not only the Eibishter's name the way it's in the state of Ishtalsos and Gila, but even the name of the Eibishter the way it's in Madreg of Shimcha Kodesh, a Yid adds to that a higher Kedusha. The Kedusha Ha'atzmos, Nechlales, B'Chedesh Tishrei, is included in the month of Tishrei. Because it's Chedesh, Kloli, Al-Kol HaShana Kula, it's a general month for the entire year. And as such, it has within itself this phenomena of Mekadesh Shmecha on the highest Madregas. And when you're there, Maschil Rul begins the Neish Hashanah, because the Shoshana is Binyan HaMalchus. We make the Eibishter to a Melech again, and we know from all the Maimarim, of all the Rosh Hashanahs, that Inyan Zeh, Maschil B'Reish Hashanah, Shani Binyan HaMalchus, which is Bechinas Shem. Malchus is Shem, Chadal Sif Gimel. But over here, when he says that Malchus is shame, he doesn't mean shame, which is a ha'ara. He means shame, which is one where Atzmos and Hus Ein Save Baruch Hu. Yidden prostrate themselves for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They mevatel themselves to the Eibishter, and they accept His kingship willingly. That they say, "Me'edim etzratzim b'tayim b'ina melucha," we renew the Eibishter's will and the Eibishter's delight in being a king from Atzmos Mamish, where the melucha is mistalik too. Like in human kingship, you want to rouse from a human being this feeling of reimamus, which exists only by a melech, and it can only be called out by somebody else. It's through his batlas, through exaggerated submission to the king. That's how you reveal the melucha from within the melech. Which is mentioned, I don't know, 5 times in the Maimon of Tishrei of Tafshil Lamed. Now, the idea that the Yidden are those who are able to renew Hashem's Maluch after the Eibishter resigns and Akel Charim L'Kadvusim Til Atzmo is because Mishashim Shal B'nei Yisrael is Batzmusi Yisbarach. Yidden Mushish and Atzmos. And because Yishuv and Mushish and Atzmos, they're even higher than the highest understandings of L'Ois and Niflaos Gedelos Lavadi. And just like in Rosh Hashanah, the Mamlechem as a Melech, they're also Mekadesh as Hashem. So it begins with making the Eibishter a king, which is Mamshech from Atzmos, the renewal of his Melucha, and then it continues throughout Tishri. But he continues and he says that it really starts the Shabbat before. And I have to say that I'm teaching you, and if you're listening to me, you're more than an hour and a half in. So I have to give you a special Yachakeh for still being here with me on this Arichas Dika journey. But a number of times, when the Rebbe spoke to Rosh Hashanah, he went back to Atam Nitzavim, and I never really stopped to point that out, that the Rebbe keeps on saying that the beginning of Rosh Hashanah is the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah, when we do not say Kiddush HaChedesh, and the Eibishter does, and the Eibishter's Nuzach Kiddush HaChedesh is Atam Nitzavim Mayim Kolchem, and this is where the idea that Yidden HaMushish in Atzmos Hussein Sav Baruch Hu has its root and sets up the idea that in Rosh Hashanah we're going to make the Eibishter into a Melech. Let's read it. The Shabbat before Rosh Hashanah. We say, there's 10 types of Yid. And the Rabbi, the Eibishter Nitzavim. Kulchem, and it's connected to Hayom. And of course, I just want to mention that even in Pashas Kisaveh, you also have a Hayom, which is connected to Rosh Hashanah, Hayom, Hazeh, Havaya, Lekecha, Mitzavcha, the Hashem, He'amarta, the Hashem, He'mircha, Hayom, and so on. But okay, let's read Nitzavim. Hayom goes on Rosh Hashanah, like it says in Targum Yenes Menuzil on the Pasuk. He Hayom in Sefer Iyov. And the Targum trying to have Hayom Medina Rabbah was the great day of judgment. And of course, there's a number of different rayas that Hayom goes on Rosh Hashanah. Often they'll bring the raya from the Pasuk from Siddur. Zeh Hayom Tchilas Masecha. So currently Hayom Rishon, the Hayom goes on Rosh Hashanah. But here he brings the Pasuk from Sefer Iyov with the Targum. And on that day, on this date, all Yidden stand in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Above the Madrig of Shem Havaya. In other words, every Yid on Rosh Hashanah taps into his place where he's one with Atzmos and Hus. Mamish, like a Ben Yochid, which is Chokuk in Me'er Ha'av, but the kind of Av Lagabe whom there's no Zman, so there's never a point at which a Yid is not one with Atmos and Saint Baruch Hu, and from that Koyach they make Debish into a Melech again, and they affect the idea of Itu, Meshem Echapen and Yom Kippurim, and they affect the idea of Kol as Beisol Yeshu, Basukis and Chagasukis, which is the Giluyim of the highest Madregas, Chaya, Yechid, and Yochid, to sit in the sukkah in such a eifin that the makkah becomes a pnimi until it becomes an eifin of klito. So now the Rebbe says what I just said. Balpeh inside Indian said nimshach with that says mitzvah. The regarding I says mitzvah. The Gemara says kan the yachid goes on the madrega of yechida. Hashavei the yamel tzad yechida shebenefesh, which is kshura mechedus and mechutz amitmusim husiyis barach. And of course in this Tishrei the Rebbe on more than one occasion touched not just on the madrega of yachid but also yechida. But the Indian that the etzam and hashama, which is higher than yechida, is called Yachid, and we discussed in one of the Maimorim the difference between Yachid and Yechida. That Yechida is called a Chelik, and Yachid is called Etzem. L'kasher a Chelik and Etzem, and whatever the Higoyin is, but these are very, very high levels. And in Chedesh Tishri, these ideas are available to us, and they're brought down. And the Nigla form is they're brought down through the medium of what's called the Yom Midas Arachmim, and in the Chassidus form it's about Melech Basada, and the Anshe Sada Behechal HaMalchus, which is called in Chassidus Kirev HaMoira L'Nitzutz, and it comes on to the Simchas Sukkos. Nimshach Begilim Chag Sukkos and Sukkos in the Mea Simcha, like we know from the Hayom that the same Gil of Yechida, what you have in the Yom Neiraim and Kav HaYira, you have in Sukkos in the Kav HaSimcha, and of course you have a number of Simchas. You have the Simcha of Yom Tov, you have the Simcha of Lulav, you have the Simcha of Beis HaSheva, then you have the Simcha of Shmin Haretz and Simchas Torah. But you also have the Lulav and the Basukis Teishur that we talked about, which is Mamshech the Makivet Pnimius, La Klita Bepnimius B'Shmini Haretz v'Simchas Torah, Shemedayim Shem Chol Hashanah Kula comes into the whole year. So the Rebbe says Rosh Hashanah is the point at which the idea that a Yid is one with the Eibishter is triggered, and it's that koyach that allows a Yid to make Hashem into a Melech, and it creates a cascade of a whole cycle of Mayadim, which is Magala, the idea that a Yid is one with Atzmas and Hus Ein Sav Baruch Hu, and that oneness with Atzmas and Hus, which is being triggered, beginning on Rosh Hashanah and continuing with the Seres Yom and Yom Kippurim and the Dalad Yomim between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and then the first night of Sukkot and the first day of Sukkot and the second night of Sukkot and the Shana Rabbah and Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. All of that is the manifestation of the Makat Sheshmach, that no matter how high Shem is, as it's explained in this Mamer, Kedushas Hashem is even higher. And in practical terms it means the arousal and good resolutions which in a Shoshana are brought forward and manifest in actual work HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The entirety of the year, and during the entirety of the year, as we're doing those things, we're bringing forward Makat Sheshmecha from Atzmos itself. And that's the pshat leisen faktos of Hadikilel Mchaste. That even though, in terms of all madregas of Holocaust, even the highest madregas of Lifnei Ad Tzimtzum v'chuli, it's only Asiyah, and it's not a big deal, in quotes, like the Rayatz observes in Divrei Rashi B'Pashas, it's all Liosei. But the Baal Shem Tov adds that there is something which is a pella, and that is the being Mamshech, Yid is Mamshech from Atzos Mamish, Kili Elam Chaste into this world. This is a pella, even the Gavi Eibishter himself, and that is the Iyan of Makat Sheshmach. Now, if you're still here, I'm not probably an hour and 45 minutes, I don't know. But now goes Shabbos Breishis, the Bechol Zenitese Shabbos Breishis. Now I should continue, right? I'm talking an hour 45 minutes. When I talk another half an hour, I'm stopping now. I want to give a separate shir to Shabbos Breishis. And when I give that shir b'lineder, I'm going to reset the stage again. Because the Rebbe does something here to Shabbos Breishis, which is extraordinary. And I decided that I have to make it two separate shurim. So the shurim on this Maimon are very imbalanced. There's a very, very long one that after all is said and done, the message of the shir is Makat Sheshmech, even though the body of the shir is really explaining Leisin, Niflaos, Gedelis, Lavade, and bringing out the limitations and all of that. But the point of the shir, the culmination of the shir is that no, there is a Kili Elam Chaste, and that's the Yin of Makat Sheshmech. But the Rebbe's getting out of Chiddush Gadol b'Yoser, she'en kamayu, mamish, she'en kamayu. You know, you and I are sitting here and learning a Maimon of the Rebbe, which is talking, for lack of words, madregas and atzmos, or madregas which are higher than atzmos, literally. Because we're talking about the Eibishter's name before it's even a thing of a thing yet, no shaychas to anything, and it's still only Shem, and the Yid is mamshach from even higher. And we're connecting it to Rosh Hashanah. The Rosh Hashanah Yid has access to how a Yid is one with atzmos mamish, and that's why he's able to be makadosh as Hashem even on these madregas. In the next year, the Rebbe said there's something even higher than Rosh Hashanah. Isn't that shocking? You know what's higher than Rosh Hashanah? Shabbos. Why? Because Shabbos is Einik. So I'm stopping, and we're going to start over Mitzvah Hashem. I'm assuming that someone out there is going to listen to this entire shir and say, ooh, I got to get the next one. So you understand that I know that these shurim are going to be heard by very few people. But this is my mission, this is my shlichus, to teach Chassidus, and I'm particularly heartened by the zchus to be able to teach in English the Maimarim of Rabbeinu Nesiyenu Shlita, our Rebbe. And if you're the only person who listens to the shir till the end, I gave the shir for you, and I'm happy that you're listening, and it's enough for me. Dai, maspek, Yanuk. But the Rebbe is speaking such high in Yonim, you don't have this Maimarim of the Rebbe before. But the Rebbe is going to argue that there's something even higher than Rosh Hashanah, which is the Yin Shabbos. Ukafishi is by Lakam and the Mitzvah.